Baki is in the middle of his meditation training, leaving the captain patiently waiting for him. After his meditation is done, Baki apologizes to the captain for making him wait for him. He asks the captain what business he has here and learns that the captain wants him to meet with a certain individual. After taking a sip of the green tea, the captain warns Baki that the person he wants Baki to meet is someone who is overwhelmingly strong. But before revealing who that person is, the captain asks him what the name of the most powerful animal that has ever lived is. Baki wonders if the captain is implying that his dad, Yujiro, is an animal since he is the strongest in mankind. But the captain explains that he is not asking about the most powerful animal alive today. Rather, he is asking about the most powerful animal in existence, which is a dinosaur. The captain simplifies his question and asks Baki what the most powerful dinosaur is. This is basic knowledge to Baki, and he claims that a T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex, is the most powerful dinosaur. After getting the answer, the captain shows Baki a newspaper, which has the headline of a man who is supposedly more powerful than a T-Rex. The captain explains that a group of expeditioners found a frozen fossil of a T-Rex while trying to mine in a salt reserve and noticed that a fierce human was also frozen right beside the frozen T-Rex. Seeing the mysterious frozen man, the expeditioners asked questions like, why is the human there beside the T-Rex? How did humans exist in the area of dinosaurs? And even if they did, why does it look like this mysterious human is about to attack that giant T-Rex? Their questions remain unanswered, and realizing that this might be the biggest discovery ever recorded, the group decides to call it into their headquarters first. After that, the archaeologists extracted the mystery man from the ice and began experimenting with him to revive him. The head scientist expresses his gratitude to everyone for bringing him such an extraordinary find. He claims that the entire history of the world will now change thanks to this discovery, as everyone believed that humans appeared no more than 7 million years ago, up until now. Still, this discovery cannot be made public and must be kept secret, as the head scientist, Payne, believes that it will just wreak havoc on all of humanity's current thinking, and the impact would be too great if it were revealed all at once. So, he decides to release the data carefully and gradually to the public. One of the scientists wonders if they will be able to successfully revive the mystery fossil man, and Payne explains that it will not be as simple as giving someone mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But he still believes that reviving a fossil from millions of years ago is plausible, as there has been a similar incident. He tells them a story where, in the year 2000, in New Mexico, a professor named Russell Brelland discovered tiny drops of water in a piece of 250-million-year-old rock salt. Once he extracted it, he found that it was seawater from 250 million years ago, and inside, there were microorganisms from that period carefully preserved in it. The professor, Russell, placed them in a controlled environment with the ideal combination of nutrition, simulation, and temperature. After experimenting on them for 120 days, every one of those microorganisms revived. So, Payne believes that the layer of salt that preserved those microorganisms for 100 million years is also the same salt that has preserved this mysterious fossil man. So, he thinks it's also possible to bring this man back to life. After that conversation, Payne starts the revival project of the mysterious fossil man and names him Pickle, as the fossil man was literally pickled inside the rock salt layer for 100 million years. Pickle gets attached to a massive array of monitors in his body, ready to measure any physiological and neurological activity. Since Pickle lived during the Jurassic period, the scientist also adjusts the temperature in the lab accordingly and immerses Pickle in a solution that constantly feeds him almost exactly everything that he needs for his bodily fluids. This complicated cycle continues for 3 months, but the scientists still fail to revive Pickle despite all their efforts. So, one of the scientists, Alan, calls this experiment a failure and starts slacking off instead of monitoring Pickle. While slacking off, the scientist, Alan, begins craving steak and remembers that they literally have a T-Rex inside their facility. So, he decides to go there to be the first human ever to eat T-Rex. Meanwhile, Payne finds out that the tissues of the T-Rex are the same tissues that he found in Pickle's stomach. That could mean only one thing, and that is that Pickle was preying on the T-Rex. Payne cuts a piece of the T-Rex and starts cooking a steak with it. The smell of the steak reaches Pickle's room, and that smell wakes him up from his slumber. Waking up from his sleep of 200 million years, Pickle sits stunned and bewildered, seeing the machines and wires attached to him. The things he sees are incomprehensible to him. A wall of lights, straight lines running vertically and horizontally, circles, transparent objects. None of these things had even existed when he was last awake, which to him was moments ago. He steps outside of his recovery pod to figure out where he is. Surrounded by all these mysteries, the only thing that feels familiar to him is the smell of a T-Rex. He follows the directions to the smell and comes in front of Alan, who is in the middle of eating the steak. Alan wonders what he should do, as he thinks Pickle is probably going to kill him. He thinks of using his knife, but he knows that would do no harm. Then he remembers that there was a gun inside his desk, but he knows that even a gun wouldn't put a scratch on his skin. However, Pickle shows that he isn't interested in Alan. Rather, he just wants to have a bite of that tasty steak. After eating the steak in one bite, Pickle then begins to smell Alan to see if he is food, but realizing that he is not, Pickle starts going away. Alan gets so scared that he instinctively brings out the gun inside his desk, and that alarms Pickle, and he begins to crawl in rage. As Pickle slowly starts stepping towards him, Alan tries to tell him to stop by pointing a gun at him, but he should know better that Pickle can neither understand his language nor whether the gun is a harmful weapon. Still, to scare him off, Alan shoots at Pickle's feet. But in the blink of an eye, Pickle basically teleports behind him. So, this time, Alan shoots right at Pickle's chest, but the bullets just bounce off his skin. However, one of the bullets scratches Pickle's skin, and he begins to bleed. Pickle then throws back the bullets at Alan at bullet speed, and one of them hits him in the elbow. Alan thinks this is a nightmare and begins to shoot Pickle again after reloading his gun. But Pickle still shows no killing intent, shakes the gun off of Alan's hands, and tries to communicate with him by growling. Alan realizes that Pickle wants him to do something, but as he doesn't understand savage language, Pickle sends him flying to a nearby wall. Alan realizes that this is his end, so he quickly and slowly limps away from him. He leads Pickle to the place where the T-Rex is stored and locks him inside with the T-Rex. He thinks just maybe he has saved himself and calls the police there. The head scientist, Payne, comes there and learns everything from Alan, including the part that Pickle has been brought back to life and is locked inside with the T-Rex. Payne asks him why he called so many police officers if Pickle was already locked inside the freezing chamber. Alan replies that he will only understand once he sees what kind of monster Pickle is. He tells Payne that even bullets bounce off Pickle's body, and that Pickle threw the bullets back at him even faster than the speed of a bullet. So, Alan thinks that even 5 police cars might not be enough to stop this monster. One of the police officers in a black suit claims to have secured the location where Pickle is and tells Payne that he and his officers are going to storm and to restrain him. The special agent tries to introduce himself, but Payne doesn't want to waste his time on that and makes it clear to him that he needs to send the army here immediately, as dozens of officers won't be enough to restrain Pickle. Although the officer doesn't want to argue with a Nobel Prize winner, he cannot help but wonder why they cannot deal with one single unarmed man themselves. He believes that no matter how much strength or stamina Pickle possesses, he is still a single person. And unless he is King Kong, the officer is sure that he will be able to handle him with ease. But what he doesn't know is that Pickle is worse than King Kong and probably stronger than Godzilla. Right at that moment, Pickle breaks out of the facility, making everyone realize that they are dealing with a calamity-level threat. So, the officer calls for more backup immediately, but it is too late as Pickle runs towards them and begins to destroy the police cars. Payne figures out why Pickle is enraged and explains that since he saw the T-Rex dead inside, he lost the only reason for living, which was to fight with the T-Rex. That is why he has become so enraged, as the humans have stolen his rival's life. On the other side, to secure the army's assistance, the police forces sent word that an armed terrorist had infiltrated a nuclear waste isolation plant. Troops come quickly to help restrain the armed terrorist, but what they don't know is that the armed terrorist is actually a miniature Godzilla. Anyway, the soldiers are actually happy to be given this mission, as this mission has provided them with the perfect opportunity to test out the new secret military-grade weapon they have been developing. The soldiers reach there, and the head army officer calls them reckless and irresponsible for making a false report about an armed terrorist. But having seen the situation here, he thinks that a suicide bomber must have been here. The army officer sees Pickle sitting patiently, so he asks Payne why he isn't just killing the man with guns and bullets. Payne explains that no matter how savage Pickle is, he is still a treasure precious to all humanity, which is why he cannot be killed. The army officers understand and promise Payne that he will capture Pickle without harming him. To do so, he decides to use the Iron Man suit, i.e., the Multi-Purpose Battle Bachian, in short form MPBM. The battle machine slowly approaches Pickle, but seeing that he isn't moving a muscle, the head officer wonders why he is doing so. Payne explains that Pickle is actually guarding the T-Rex that is inside, as it is the only thing left from his era. To protect what is his, Pickle goes to fight with the battle machine and breaks it with one blow. The pilot realizes that he is about to be killed, so he desperately tries to capture Pickle. But Pickle remains unaffected, defeats the guy, and single-handedly holds off the entire army of the United States. The captain of the Special Forces wonders what they should do and goes himself to confront the savage Pickle. He strips off his modern clothes and approaches Pickle naked, so that he no longer gets hostile towards him. The captain then holds out his hands, telling Pickle that he wants to hear his story, and although Pickle doesn't understand what he is saying, he also holds out his hand, accepting their friendship. So, the captain promises to take him to the perfect place called Japan, where he can live with beings similar to him. Sometime in the future, the United States Army escorts Pickle using the U.S. Air Force military airplane to Japan. The Japanese news reporter gets the news that the United States military airplane has landed here, and they reveal that they have heard that a primitive man is inside that plane who was revived from the Jurassic period. The captain and Baki see the news together, indicating that we are back to the present. In the meantime, the soldiers surround Pickle to escort him out of the airplane, and it is revealed that Pickle is finally wearing some clothes. Pickle remains on guard and checks his surroundings to see if there is anything dangerous. Just seeing Pickle on TV, Baki realizes that he is strong, but he is not just strong but also a savage who gives off a very primitive air. One of the news reporters tries to take an interview with Pickle, and seeing her beauty, Pickle gets interested in her. He grabs her face with his gigantic hands and then starts to get his way with her right away. The soldiers can't bear such a vile act, but no matter what they do, Pickle doesn't move a muscle away from the news reporter. As he keeps taking advantage of her, everyone has no other option but to silently watch, as they do not possess the ability to stand against an overpowered savage. All of Japan witnesses this atrocity, and seeing how innate Pickle's savagery is, everyone becomes hostile towards him. Everyone reacts differently to this situation, but attention is fixed on one thing, and that is the vile, savage monster standing in front of them. However, Pickle doesn't realize that he has done something wrong and immediately goes to sleep, right after destroying a woman's life. Pain broadcasts his theory to the world that during the 100 million years of the dinosaurs from the Jurassic to the Cretaceous periods, when a giant meteor struck the Earth, an enormous cloud of dust billowed into the atmosphere and blocked out the sun's heat. Because of that, the surface of the Earth was instantly plunged to the same temperature as the space, which is negative 270.4 deg Celsius. As everything on Earth became frozen, the giant dinosaurs and the insects, as well as all battles, froze right then and there. The impact shifted the tectonic plates of the Earth's crust, and as a result, the usually stable salt rock stratum preserved the one specific battle between Pickle and the T-Rex. As for the two beings discovered preserved in salt earlier, the T-Rex was too badly damaged to be revived, whereas the human, Pickle, remained whole. Although Pain feels nothing but regrets for the female reporter who was the victim at the airport, he cannot move from the fact that Pickle is still a world treasure as he was 200 million years ago. He explains that it is justified for Pickle to do such things, as righteousness and morals mean nothing to a man who is primitive. However, the public doesn't agree with Pain's words and starts revolting against the protection of Pickle. They express their desires to punish the primitive man and tell the government to give him a public execution. A news reporter explains the situation, saying that ordinary citizens have descended on the front gates of the US military base. Since the victim, Pickle, was a popular news reporter, there are hundreds of demonstrators who want justice. However, the US military has not made any comment regarding the vile incident caused by the primitive man and has kept its silence. Due to this, the demonstrators' age has reached its peak. Amongst the demonstrators, one person comes forward to the gates, and that man is none other than Baki's father, the ogre himself, Yujiro. While he tries to make his way through the guards to meet with the new strong opponent, another ogre named Ritsu also sneaks past the guards to meet with Pickle. Speaking of Pickle, he is inside a fake treehouse inside a confined room surrounded by military officers. One of the military officers sees the fake dinosaur statue inside and commends the people for being able to build this place in less than a month of time. But he is not sure if Pickle would like this place, as there are books, a fish tank, and a fake dinosaur inside the room. He wonders if Pickle is even enjoying staying here, but since they still have no way to communicate, they don't know what Pickle is going through. On the other side, Ritsu hides behind a truck and feels that he is trying to sneak into a woman's bedroom. He explains that the only reason he is here is because he has wanted to see the man since he saw the TV broadcast. Since that TV broadcast, the urge started the moment when he first laid eyes on that mysterious savage. A guard on duty comes Jack's way, so he hides himself once again and gets behind him to secretly move around for the time being. The guard doesn't even notice his presence, so he easily begins walking towards the headquarters. Meanwhile, Yujiro tells the guards to step aside, but they still stand there, guarding the gate. So, Yujiro tells the protesters to move back, as he claims that he will now send these guards flying away. He activates his demonic ability and begins to emanate a red aura that makes him look like a true monster. One of the protesters, named Tamatsu Ishizuka, tells how hot he feels near Yujiro and explains that he feels like being near a hot engine. According to him, after Yujiro emanated his demon aura, something happened to the gate guards, and they began to beat each other for no reason. The other guard doesn't even try to stop the other guards from fighting against each other and instead begins punching himself. The man in black, Yujiro, just stands there and watches as the guards beat themselves. Eventually, he walks up to the gate as if he were pleased by the guards and enters the military base. The protester felt as if the guards were some unruly brothers who were caught doing mischief by their strict father, Yujiro, so they tried to pin the blame on each other by beating each other. It was as if they were punishing themselves before their father could punish them. Even though the guards were bleeding, losing their teeth, and swelling up, they didn't stop. But at one command from Yujiro, they stopped instantly. Yujiro tells them that they have made the right choice and reveals that if even one of them had run off instead of fighting, he would have killed them then and there. He explains that when he emanated his aura, the soldiers immediately realized that it was better to kill themselves than die at the hands of Yujiro. That's why they chose to harm each other as their last resort. Yujiro commends them for their quick thinking and forgives them for making the right choice. He then enters the military building, and the soldiers finally feel relieved now that the monster is out of their sight. They wonder what kind of monstrous aura they felt earlier that made them do this. Yujiro cuts through the lock of the gate with his bare hand and keeps proceeding forward while Ritsu is trying his best to match his breathing to the soldier in front of him so that he doesn't notice him. But the real problem is that Ritsu has to find where on this large military base the primitive man, Pickle, is hidden. Suddenly, the soldier Ritsu is hiding behind runs into another soldier who gets into a conversation about how much of a pain their task of patrolling the perimeter is. Ritsu decides to stick with the other soldier as he thinks that he might lead him to the primitive man. But suddenly, the soldier sees Jack's shadow and realizes that someone is standing behind him. He turns around and sees Ritsu, but before he can report this, Ritsu knocks him out with one quick punch on the neck. Then, he jumps on a network tower to get a proper look at the military base. He notices that one of the buildings stands out, as there looks to be a base inside another base in it. So, Ritsu makes a grappling hook using a rope and a stone and goes to the building using it. Then he sneaks inside using the ventilators and finds the room where Pickle is held. However, he is not the first man to have reached this place, as he sees that his old acquaintance Shinogi is already here and has already defeated the guards. Both of them wonder at the same time why they are here, and Shinogi begins to laugh, realizing that Ritsu is also here to see Pickle. Shinogi expresses that he also wants to meet this primitive man, and if possible, he wants to fight him too. Since both of them want the same thing, the first person to be here should get the chance to meet Pickle, and that is Shinogi. However, a person named Doppo bursts out of the dinosaur statue and tells him he is the one to have reached here first. However, they are not the only ones here, as Jack comes out of the small pond, Goki comes outside of the bed, and Urachi breaks the walls to come inside. Another associate named Jaku also climbs down through the ventilators and gets surprised to see everyone else present there. Now that these strong people have arrived here and have had their reunion, it's time for the main attraction to come out. They wonder who amongst them is going to fight Pickle, and before that, they decide to see what Pickle is even up to. They look inside the treehouse and find Pickle in a deep sleep. Orochi can't believe that he is still sleeping, even with all the commotion out here. Jack decides to wake Pickle up, as he can't hold his patience any longer, and kicks the tree. Pickle comes out of the treehouse and starts taking a long wee-wee before talking with the others. Yujiro reveals himself to be there and welcomes Pickle to the future. Orochi tries to pick up a fight with Yujiro, but he realizes how much of a gap they have in between as Yujiro unscrambles his shoelaces in seconds. Yujiro then penetrates the impenetrable glass wall using his sheer strength and asks Pickle why he is named after a salted vegetable when he is an ancient great warrior. Yujiro knows that Pickle cannot understand what he is saying, so he tells Pickle to just sense what he is trying to say, like a child senses what their mother tries to tell them. Yujiro tells him that the 8 fighters alongside him have come to fight him and that his strength has piqued Yujiro's interest. Yujiro goes on to have a fist bump with Pickle, but as soon as their fist gets into connection, the entire room begins to illuminate, indicating that they are both trying to push each other's fists in the opposite direction. Yujiro's strength makes Pickle think that he is the same as a T-Rex, so he increases his strength. So, Yujiro uses one of his moves instinctively to protect himself and makes Pickle roll onto the floor. Pickle gets shocked to see such a strong man and gets up again, attracting everyone's attention. But they fail to have their long-awaited battle, as the military surrounds the building and asks Yujiro to surrender himself. Yujiro comes out of the gate, and the soldier immediately apologizes to him for bothering him while he is enjoying himself. The soldier, Henry, tells Yujiro that he isn't here to arrest him, as they just physically can't. Yujiro asks him how he knows that he came here, and the soldier explains that Yujiro simply went through the front gate, so everyone saw him coming inside. Yujiro asks Henry to just say what he wants, and Henry explains that he cannot let Yujiro fight with the World Heritage, which is Pickle. Yujiro tells him that he will agree to leave on the condition that Henry lets the other 8 fighters leave freely as well. Henry gladly agrees, so everyone leaves this place freely except one who reveals himself to be hiding on the tree. The guy then leaves through the ventilator, unintentionally showing Pickle the path to his own escape. On the other side, a kid named Rumina asks Baki if he can beat the primitive man, but Baki explains that he has no interest in Pickle, and the only goal he has in mind is to defeat his father, Yujiro. But Rumina remains persistent, so Baki tells him that Pickle shouldn't be fought against as he is an international treasure. Since Pickle is a precious asset to humanity, fighting him is as impossible as making a pyramid his home. But Rumina still wants Baki to beat him, as he has heard how fiery Pickle is and has heard that he is even stronger than a T-Rex. Rumina finds it hard to believe that Baki isn't interested since Baki has fought a praying mantis and many other monster-like beings. Baki explains to him that he doesn't need to fight every single being in the world because he wants to become the best fighter in the world. Rather, he just wants to fight his dad and beat him. Rumina notices how happy Baki looks and mentions how Baki gets happy every time he talks about his dad. Baki never realized that and wonders for a moment if he really does get happy thinking about the ogre, Yujiro. Meanwhile, at the US military base, Pickle gets bored being inside the tree all day and night and recalls over and over again his short encounter with Yujiro. Yujiro's technique makes Pickle wonder what kind of animal makes that move, and that acts like an unsolvable puzzle in his mundane life. So, Pickle desires to meet Yujiro once again. At the Kung Fu Training and Research Center, Ritsu showboats his strength and gets applauded by Baki and the others. Ritsu sees Baki there and asks why he showed up here today all of a sudden. Ritsu assumes that Baki wants him to teach him Kung Fu. Baki nods and explains that since Kung Fu is a treasure trove of principles, he wants Ritsu to teach him the ways to become a better martial artist. But Ritsu refuses Baki's request, as he has no interest in him. Ritsu explains that he has no interest in anything at all currently, and it's all due to the primitive man, Pickle. Baki tells Ritsu that he cannot just fight Pickle, as he is an important treasure of humanity. Ritsu, of course, knows that, but he still cannot ignore his desire to fight the man. He even calls this sensation similar to love and expresses how he wants to get to know Pickle better, wants to touch him, and wants to grab him somewhere inappropriate. Baki understands that Ritsu is burning with compassion and wants the savage all for himself. So, Baki leaves the dojo in disappointment and wonders why everyone in Japan only cares for Pickle. Speaking of Pickle, he has been escorted somewhere else to a large, confined stadium where Captain Stridham and Mitsunari Tokugawa come to meet with Pain. Pain thanks both of them for their cooperation. The captain reveals that Pickle has not consumed anything except water for a month, and wonders how he is even alive and functioning. Pain explains that because of his pride, Pickle isn't eating anything, as he only wants the meat of a T-Rex. Pain thinks that Pickle won't eat anything except the enemies who fight him. So, to feed Pickle, Pain reveals that he brought a fierce fighting bull from Spain, a large bear from Kamchatka, and even a lion to fight him. However, instead of fighting Pickle, those three fierce animals fled from there like little kittens after taking a glance at him, realizing that they were no match against him. Even the lion ran off with its tail between his legs, so there was no other way to feed him other than by bringing strong, fearless humans. But that's the last resort, and Pain has another animal in his sleeves that he hasn't eaten for 5 days, and that is a Siberian tiger. He releases the Siberian tiger, but as the tiger approaches Pickle, he kills it with one bear hug and then eats the tiger raw. The news of the Siberian tiger, which is on the verge of extinction, being fed to a molester by a savage man spreads nationwide. But the scientist Pain takes full responsibility and tells the world that Pickle is far more precious than a mere tiger. He explains that the only food Pain would eat currently is Siberian tigers, and he feels glad that there are still 500 Siberian tigers left. Pain thinks that he should let Pickle eat every last one and doesn't care if that would make that species extinct. It's clear how obsessed this old man is with the naked primitive man. Anyway, the old man claims that Pickle alone outweighs any other animal species, but this comment makes people get more furious instead of calming them. Ritsu sees the news and decides to meet with Tokugawa at his mansion to solve this food problem. He tells Tokugawa that since finding food for Pickle is giving them trouble, he wants to help. But Tokugawa explains that the real problem is that Pickle's current food is an endangered species. From what Ritsu has heard, Pickle only eats things that come and attack him. So, he proposes to become the food for Pickle, as that would also give him a chance to fight him, even if it meant that his life would come to an end. Although Tokugawa isn't sure if he should let Pickle eat humans, he does take interest in Ritsu's idea. Still, he hesitates, so Ritsu tries to convince him by making him realize how much of a miracle Pickle's very existence is and that they should do anything to preserve him. Ritsu explains that although he will come as the prey, he has no intention of being eaten, and he claims to be confident enough to stand against Ritsu alone. So, Tokugawa and the captain propose this idea to Pain, who immediately rejects it as he cannot let his ultimate treasure eat a fellow human. But the two remain persistent and tell Pain that it will be fine. So, Pain agrees and lets Ritsu enter the stadium field where Pickle is currently sleeping peacefully. The captain is intrigued to see how this battle will go, as this will be a fight between the great master of 4,000 years of kung fu arts and the natural strongest beast of the world before the existence of mankind. He thinks that something amazing will happen once they face each other, but Pain believes that Ritsu will be eaten instantly and it will be all over. Tokugawa and the captain believe otherwise and tell Pain to shut up and just watch the show. Being told to shut up, the Nobel Prize winner, Pain, falls into a state that he has never encountered before. But he still can't get himself to be quiet, as he doesn't think any human would be able to stand against Pickle. At that moment, Pickle gets up from his sleep, sensing something coming towards him and seeing that it's Ritsu, who makes a grand entrance, shocking Pickle. Pickle immediately takes a fighting stance, knowing that a dangerous man is in front of him. So, Ritsu feels grateful that he was recognized by arguably the world's strongest fighter, and promises to put on a good show. Pickle begins to hiss like a wild cat as he feels alarmed by Ritsu's presence and goes for the first attack, shoving him away. Ritsu realizes that he doesn't stand a chance against Pickle if he only uses his sheer strength. So, he returns to using his kung fu and delivers an overhead kick at Pickle's face, then trips him on the ground. The captain is shocked to see Pickle being beaten so easily, and he even sees tears coming out of Pickle's eyes. Ritsu explains that the attacks he made against Pickle would have killed any normal person. So he commends Pickle and again goes to attack him as he begins to stand up. As he begins to overpower Pickle and hits him with several blows, Pain gets stunned. Ritsu thinks that Pickle must be going through a concussion after taking all those attacks. However, Pickle reveals himself to be unscathed and smacks Ritsu's head in the blink of an eye, knocking him out. Pickle reveals that he was not crying in pain, but rather in tears of happiness as he has finally found a formidable enemy. Pickle then starts eating Ritsu right away and begins ripping off his muscles, even though Ritsu tries his best to fight back. Ritsu realizes that he won't live too long, so he removes his shoes to have a better chance against Pickle. However, his martial arts have no effect on Pickle's, and that mortifies Ritsu. So, Ritsu begins to attack Pickle with his pure emotions, abandoning his martial arts, and that pathetic sight even surprises Pickle. But Ritsu finally gets his conscience back as he finally remembers that he is the Sea King, and he begins to fight with Pickle once again with his martial arts. He uses his kung fu to deliver deadly blows on Pickle and manages to knock him out. With this battle coming to an end, Ritsu successfully protects the history of 4,000 years of kung fu that was bestowed on him. As Pickle falls flat on the ground, Ritsu finally feels relieved and gets grateful for his technique, as it worked perfectly. Tokugawa, Pain, and the captain watch in astonishment, and Pain finally agrees with them that martial arts is truly something amazing. He explains that he had never imagined a normal person like Ritsu would be able to hold on this long. But Tokugawa corrects him, saying he phrases that incorrectly, as Ritsu is the one standing tall, and Pickle is the one who is defeated. But Pain tells him to turn around and claims that Ritsu has clearly failed to defeat Pickle since his finishing blow was not enough to give Ritsu a concussion. What Pain says tends to be true as Pickle starts to get up again, and that surprises everyone. Pain reveals to them that when Pickle was first discovered at the salt mine, they brought him to the nuclear waste plant, where Pain ran him through a full battery of tests. His muscle tissue, bones, and organs were all complete surprises to the scientists, as all of them were far superior to humans of the current age. But the most striking of all was Pickle's cervical spine, which had incredible thickness and durability. The necks of bipedal creatures, like humans, cannot even be compared structurally to Pain's, and Pain believes that one can only find something distantly comparable if they find a large, four-legged beast whose necks constantly support the weight of an enormous head. So, the circumstantial evidence only points to one conclusion for Pain, and that is that until a certain period in Pickle's life, he was most likely a quadruped. In other words, he had 4 legs instead of 2 legs and 2 arms. Anyway, Ritsu tries to attack Pickle as he begins to get up, but he dodges it by jumping high above the ground. Although Ritsu is using the secret arts that have been passed down since ancient China, whose system can only be described as incredible, it has no match against Pickle. Pickle takes his beastly stance on his 4 legs, indicating that he has finally gotten serious. So, Ritsu again takes his fighting stance, unsure if he will truly be able to beat Pickle. He stares at the beast-like stance of Pickle and sees that it is an unfamiliar forward-bent posture. He realizes that it's similar to the posture that sprinters take before racing and also to the starting stance of a sumo wrestler. But Pickle's stance is closer to the attack stance of a lion, which is focused only on forward propulsion. So, he realizes that Pickle will suddenly lunge at him with an attack of super fast speed. But Ritsu doesn't feel scared and still wants to fight head-on to see how much more Pickle is going to impress him. He decides not to even dodge the attack and prepares to use the symbolic weapon of Kung Fu, the crushing fist. He believes that he can smash Pickle with this attack and tells him to come at him. So, Pickle ignites, figuratively turns his body into flames, and dashes at Ritsu with maximum speed. It's revealed that the attack Pickle is about to use was only used against his most powerful enemies, like Triceratops and the T-Rex. Ritsu hesitates for a moment, so he misses his chance to use his secret move, the crushing fist. So, Pickle crashes into Ritsu and sends him flying away at the speed of a bullet. As Ritsu gets knocked out unconscious, Pickle stands out as the indisputable winner. Tokugawa finally gets afraid, seeing such tremendous strength, and regrets letting Ritsu fight him in the first place. Pickle begins to get into tears once again and slowly approaches Ritsu. Seeing that, Pain realizes that Pickle is about to eat Ritsu and doesn't get surprised anymore, as what's about to happen is only natural. Tokugawa doesn't want Ritsu to die, but Pain makes it clear that he cannot break the promise made to Pickle. So, they have no choice but to just watch the savage eat one of the 8 great fighters on Earth. Tokugawa can't believe how merciless Pain is, as he will just let Pickle eat another human. But Pain reminds him that it was actually Tokugawa who wanted Pickle to eat Ritsu in the first place. But still, Tokugawa can't let this happen and runs to the field to save his friend, Ritsu. He tells Pickle not to eat Ritsu, as Ritsu only thinks about him day and night and is actually his biggest fan. Pickle knocks him away and begins to scream, implying that he no longer wants to hear anything from the old man. He gets into tears again and begins to mercilessly eat Ritsu, bidding farewell to him. His tears clearly imply that this primitive man's heart is full of sorrow, and Pain also understands that. So Pain sneaks behind him with a tranquilizer and makes him fall unconscious before he can finish off Ritsu. Then, Pain takes Ritsu to a hospital, revealing that one of his legs has already been eaten by the primitive man. Ritsu regains consciousness after some time to discover that he is missing one leg, but he feels grateful that he isn't missing his entire body. He regrets not keeping his promise to Tokugawa since he promised him that if he lost, he would gladly be eaten by Pickle. He looks at his left shoulder and remembers how he just let it get eaten, and he begins to shiver in pain even thinking about it. Ritsu wonders why he was so obsessed with Pickle that he even let him eat him. He curses himself for being so overconfident to think that he would win against the man who is arguably stronger than the strongest man, Yujiro. Baki comes there to visit Ritsu after hearing the news and seeing the state that he is in. Baki realizes that he must have truly gone to fight Pickle. Baki tells Ritsu that he couldn't believe his ears when he heard that he had lost a part of his body, and to even think that it got eaten is more shameful. They both stare at each other, and before Baki asks him the formal questions, Ritsu answers them all and ends the conversation by saying that a martial artist has lost a fight and, as a result, lost the function of a body part. He feels no shame in that, but what shames him is the fact that he spoke as if he was prepared for the consequences when he was actually not prepared at all, and he acted as if he had the bravery to fight Pickle when he did not. Baki tells him that he doesn't need to explain anything as he has already heard everything from Tokugawa. Baki assures him that he did not deceive anyone and calls his action a simple mistake. But Ritsu believes otherwise, as he claimed to have been prepared to die, ready to kill without the backing of a strong resolve. So, he thinks that he has violated his own principles by telling lies to himself and Tokugawa. Baki mentions how Ritsu trained his whole life to transform his body into a weapon. But now that he has lost his leg, he can no longer remain the deadly weapon he once was. Baki knows that the pain inside Ritsu's heart is not coming because of his lost leg but because of his inner turmoil. So, Baki advises him to take pride in that pain, as he is still the unparalleled Sea King martial artist and the true treasure of the People's Republic of China. Baki tells him that he once looked up the meaning of the word Ritsu on the internet out of curiosity, and found out that it meant fierce, intense, and someone who never strayed from their path. Baki still believes that Ritsu has all of the qualities in his name and tells him that his true worth lies in his incredible spirit. Ritsu appreciates how much motivation Baki has given him and bows to him in gratitude for showing him the right path before it was too late. Baki then comes out of the hospital and suddenly remembers how his father, Yujiro, too, sometimes used the word eat. Baki knows that the word eat is an example, just a figure of speech when the fight ends. For example, Yujiro doesn't use the word win or defeat, but eats, and Baki finally realizes what he means and begins to laugh again. At another dojo, the dojo master named Doppo shows off his skills and impresses his apprentices. He looks at a wire between 2 cement bricks and cuts it with his bare hands. Katsumi takes the steel wire in his hands and reveals that even swords cannot cut, implying that Doppo's hands are sharper than a sword. A subordinate calls Doppo as there is a call for him, so Doppo goes to take it and finds out that the call is from the noble elder Takugawa. He learns from the noble elder Takugawa that the Sea King Ritsu was eaten and gets shocked to learn that. He also learns that Ritsu lost against Pickle. However, the noble elder Takugawa explains that Ritsu didn't lose technically and got eaten by Pickle. After hearing everything, Doppo cuts the call and realizes what he must do. He calls his subordinate, Katsumi, to his chamber and asks him to have a seat. While drinking tea, Doppo gives him the news that the Sea King Ritsu lost to Pickle and got eaten by him. But the defeat wasn't that simple, as Ritsu didn't admit defeat. Rather, he got eaten before he lost his spirit to fight. Hearing that, Katsumi's blood begins to boil, and he decides to take revenge on Pickle for doing something so lowly to a kung fu master. But Doppo tells him to calm down and explains the real issue here. He explains that Pickle isn't underestimating modern humans, or, to be more exact, he doesn't even deem humans worthy of underestimating. Basically, Pickle doesn't even consider humans worthy of fighting, and hence he has begun considering them as his food. But what Doppo is saying is exactly what underestimating means, so Katsumi begs him to not make it more confusing than it is. On the other side, at the Shinshinkai headquarters, the Way of Karate Master Shinogi gets the news from Takugawa about Ritsu being eaten by Pickle. Like Doppo, he also doesn't take the news lightly and wonders what step he should take now. The news of Ritsu being eaten spreads like wildfire among the Atsugi base reunion members, and every single one of them gets in disbelief. Meanwhile, Pain finds out that Pickle has woken up again, and that makes him wonder how much resistance he has to anesthetics since the tranquilizer he used on him could knock out a rhino for days. But what's more terrifying is the fact that Pickle is no longer inside the stadium and has escaped to the open world. Takugawa mentions that the only other person who managed to escape from this locked prison was the strongest man, the ogre Yujiro. Anyway, a man named Takeshi Kenmachi, who is a master at karate, boxing, and weightlifting, roams around the city. Apparently, in each of the dojos and gyms Takeshi went to, there was nobody on par with him. So, the question arises as to what this man is doing while roaming aimlessly in the city at night. Well, actually, Takeshi is searching for someone worthy with whom he can fight. Although he doesn't kill his opponents, he doesn't leave them injured either. So, he is basically a very serious fighter. He looks around, hoping to find a playmate tonight, and as he finds nobody, he gets disappointed. So, he goes to an alley to take a break and takes a wee-wee on the garbage bag when suddenly, a hand comes out of the garbage bag and drags Takeshi inside his own pee. The man reveals himself to be none other than Pickle, who only did it to take Takeshi's clothes, thinking that he could finally fit in with the townspeople. However, because of his huge body, he clearly stands out and people become wary of him. Pickle reveals that he has learned some words like stars, lights, fire, and heat and takes pride in speaking human words. He clearly looks confused, as he doesn't understand a single thing in front of him or what the people are doing this late at night. In Pickle's Jurassic era, his only purpose of living was to eat whatever attacked him. But now, that purpose needs to be changed, as clearly no one is attacking him anymore. But Pickle knows that he cannot survive without fighting, so he desperately wishes for someone powerful to show up. That's when a truck runs him over, so he thinks that the truck is actually a fighter. So, he gets up to fight back and squishes the truck with his bare hands when a smell comes from inside the truck. And conveniently, it's all raw meat. So, Pickle begins to eat the meat right away as he feels hungry and doesn't technically end his rule of eating something after defeating them, as he also defeated the truck. At the Shinshikai headquarters, the Way of Karate, we can see a man drenched in his own sweat. And that man is none other than Katsumi. He practices his karate technique on a sandbag, and hits it with several consecutive blows in mere seconds. With that simple attack, the sandbag begins to burn with the immense heat from Katsumi's attack. He reveals to be actually letting out his frustration on the sandbag as he was insulted by Yujiro when the 8 fighters went to see Pickle. There Yujiro mocked Katsumi, saying that nobody wanted to be around him, including him, Baki, and Katsumi's father. Although Katsumi is hurt by that comment, he knows that Yujiro is right and even everyone else senses that too. Although his father, Doppo, made him the chairman of this karate dojo, he knows that he isn't good enough to have deserved this position. As Shinshikai is the largest karate school of Nippon, Katsumi feels that he doesn't have the abilities needed to be the chairman. He doesn't have any greatness, legends, and history in him like his father does. To have a legacy like his father, Katsumi realizes that he needs to do something unthinkable. So, he decides to fight the primitive man, Pickle. Right then, a subordinate of his gives him a call, telling him that he has located Pickle out on the streets of the city and has even destroyed a truck. Realizing that Pickle has escaped, Katsumi thinks things cannot get better for him as he was just wondering how he was going to find Pickle. He thanks God for giving him this opportunity, and decides to prepare well for the inevitable fight coming soon. The next morning, Katsumi tells his apprentices about Pickle's escape and expresses his yearning to take revenge for the Sea King Ritsu by killing Pickle once and for all. In order to do so, Katsumi tells them that the 55 members of his karate school must find Pickle by searching everywhere in Tokyo before the police officers does. Additionally, Katsumi orders his subordinate to notify the chiefs of all of the 220 branches of the karate school in Tokyo, so that they can gather every member to have a better chance at finding Pickle. Katsumi knows that this time, winning or losing isn't going to be a factor, and the only thing important for them is to take action quickly. On the other side, a peculiar guy sees Pickle, and not recognizing him as the primitive man, the peculiar guy asks him how he has such great physique. The peculiar man tells Pickle that he has just the right girl for him to spend the night with, and asks him $20 for it. Unfortunately, Pickle doesn't understand what he is saying, so the guy thinks he is just shy and proceeds to take him to the hotel. But before he can do that, Terada stops him and tells him to leave Pickle with him. However, the peculiar dude realizes that he has no business with Pickle, so he gets suspicious of him and asks him what his true intention is. Meanwhile, Doppo visits his son Katsumi, who is in the middle of meditating. Katsumi realizes that his father is here to stop him from fighting Pickle, so he tells his father to not interfere in his business. Doppo knows that there is no chance of Katsumi defeating Pickle, so he thinks that his son is making a terrible mistake. But Katsumi doesn't want to hear his father's opinion, and makes it clear to him that as the chairman of the Shinshikai Karate Dojo, he gets to make the decisions now. So, Doppo decides to beat some sense into his son. On the other side, the bulky guy, Terada, reveals to be a member of the Shinshikai Karate Dojo, and explains that and his gang members are here to fight Pickle. Terada then tries to escort Pickle somewhere else, but a man in white interrupts him. Terada recognizes the man in white as Hanayama and realizes that he is here to fight Pickle too. Hanayama tells Terada and his gang members to back off as he wants to be the one to fight Pickle. But Terada can't go against the orders of the chairman, Katsumi. So, Hanayama makes his assassin's subordinate fight Terada. Subsequently, the assassin's knife deflects and flies to Pickle's direction. But before he can catch the knife, Hanayama grabs it first, making Pickle realize that this guy is strong like Ritsu. Pickle still tries to take back the knife from Hanayama, and a battle of who has more strength can take the knife between the two begins. Unfortunately, the knife breaks before we could see who has more strength than the other. On the other side, Katsumi defeats his father Doppo with a cheap secret move as he needs to quickly end this match, so that he can go to the place where Pickle is. Pickle gets a bit serious and hits Hanayama with a strong punch, knocking him out. His assassin subordinates gets furious seeing his boss being treated like a toy, so he tries to retaliate. But before he can even touch Pickle, Pickle shatters his arm completely and then walks away, implying that he isn't interested in killing weaklings. The fighters of Shinshikai Karate Dojo get stunned seeing how unbelievably strong Pickle is, and that fear makes them stay where they are, even when their goal is to fight him. However, Terada musters up some courage and comes to fight Pickle to hold him back for just long enough for Katsumi to come there. So, Pickle knocks him out with one slap to the head. Hanayama gets up again to stop Pickle, so Pickle tries to push him away like last time. But this time he fails to overpower Hanayama and that shocks him. Pickle compares the strength of Hanayama to a full-grown Triceratops and finally begins to think of him worthy of a rival. Hanayama realizes that Pickle is no longer looking down on him, so he begins to push Pickle the opposite way by using more power and strength. Hanayama has only gained his godlike strength due to his kindness, duty, obligation, promises, and most importantly because of the power of friendship. Pickle realizes that his rivals are nothing compared to Hanayama's godlike inner strength, so he gets happy as he has finally met someone worthy of fighting with his true strength. But before Pickle gets into his beast mode, Hanayama stops him and reveals that he is not here to fight him and instead it will be Baki Hanma, who is standing right behind him. Everyone present there gets shocked seeing the Baki Hanma in flesh and gets excited knowing that things are about to get interesting. Baki stares at Pickle for a moment and calls him beautiful and exquisite. From Baki's perspective, anything honed for one purpose alone, stripped of everything superfluous, is beautiful, and since Pickle's purpose of living is to fight, Baki thinks he is the most beautiful being ever. Baki apologizes to Pickle for his sudden visit, and explains that when he heard from Tokugawa that Pickle had escaped, Baki couldn't resist his urge to see him and so, he requested Hanayama to get him to meet him. Pickle senses what Baki is trying to say and comes forward for a fist bump that he previously learned from Baki's father, Yujiro. Baki, thinking that Pickle is acting friendly, also goes for a fist bump, but as his fist touches with Pickle's fist, he rolls on the ground and it's revealed that Pickle has learned Yujiro's move just by feeling it once. Baki wonders how someone so ancient can be a master of the modern martial art of Aikido, and that gets him excited to fight Pickle. He doesn't resist his urge any longer and goes for a kick to Pickle's head. Baki then immediately apologizes, explaining that his kick wasn't intentional. Pickle doesn't react, begins to walk toward the opposite direction, and looks at Baki, implying that he wants Baki to follow him. So, Baki and Hanayama both follows Pickle somewhere else. Later, Katsumi learns from his subordinates about what happened earlier, and gets disappointed hearing that Pickle is gone once again. However, this is not a bad thing according to him, as he believes his original goal is still active because if Hanayama and Baki defeats Pickle, his goal to take revenge for the Sea King Ritsu will still be achieved. Katsumi's subordinate, Sakamura, thinks that he is being too generous, and tells him that this is not about Ritsu anymore as Pickle has also put his hands on Terada, so he thinks Katsumi should be the one to fight Pickle. However, Sakamura himself realizes that he is speaking too much out of his turn, so he apologizes to Katsumi. Katsumi asks Sakamura if he thinks Katsumi will be able to even defeat Pickle by himself. Seeing Sakamura hesitate, Katsumi gets his answer. Katsumi gets in despair and calls himself the hopeless, spoiled son of the great legendary Master Doppo. Katsumi finally realizes that this is a losing battle, so he apologizes his subordinates for dragging them in this too. Still, Katsumi wants to avenge Ritsu, so he again asks his subordinates to help him defeat Pickle as he can't do it alone. On the other side, Pickle reveals to have taken Baki and Hanayama back to the stadium where he was once locked in. Tokugawa scolds Pickle for escaping this place, but even he knows that Pickle isn't going to listen to him anyway. Baki asks Pickle why he has brought him here and instead of Pickle, Tokugawa answers him because it's obvious that Pickle wants to fight Baki as this place is the battleground. Baki gets excited as he has been longing to fight Pickle as well, so he takes off his shirt to fight him. However, Hanayama tells Baki to not make the same mistake as he did 5 years ago. Baki apologizes to him for causing trouble for so many innocent people in the past. But now Baki wants to have a little fun again, and that's why he wants to fight Pickle even if it's a stupid idea. Pickle kicks him in the gut, sending him flying to the stands of the stadium, making him realize that this is indeed a stupid idea. Pickle then begins to dance, and Hanayama realizes that it's his victory dance against the son of Ogre, who got defeated with one single blow. Katsumi begins to train his grip strength by walking with only his thumb fingers, so that he can get even more stronger when suddenly Ritsu comes to his dojo to tell him about the rumor he has heard recently. Ritsu asks Katsumi if he truly intends to get revenge for the sake of him, and he thinks that it's absurd for Katsumi to think he can beat someone who is even stronger than Ritsu. Katsumi knows that he is making a mistake, but he cannot help but want to avenge his master, as it was only thanks to Ritsu that he is currently standing here. However, Ritsu realizes that Katsumi actually wants to fight with Pickle just to see how strong he is, just like the other martial arts masters. Ritsu doesn't believe that Katsumi's karate will be enough to defeat the primitive man, as his own 4,000 years of mystic kung fu arts also failed to do so. Still, Katsumi remains determined, so Ritsu decides to teach him some kung fu so that he stands a better chance against Pickle, and additionally Ritsu decides to bestow down his entire kung fu heritage to Katsumi, so that he can carry on the legacy of the ancient art. However, Katsumi only wants to carry on the legacy of his original martial arts, karate. So, Ritsu respects his decision and decides to help him perfect his karate instead. Baki lays down in his room, and it is revealed that the mark of the kick by Pickle is still visible on his stomach. He wonders what his father would think of his failure and mimics his father, Yujiro's, possible comment, saying Baki suffered a pathetic defeat because he went out to find Pickle not prepared to fight, and didn't have any purpose behind it. And although he is my son, I feel disgusted by his lack of prudence. At Tokugawa's mansion, Yujiro actually learns about Baki's failure, and gets disappointed to learn that his only son has turned out to be a pathetic loser. Tokugawa tries to make an excuse, saying Baki did everything he could and did well. However, Yujiro doesn't think it's enough and tells Tokugawa not to take the loser's side here. He calms down and tells Tokugawa that because Baki has now encountered the primitive man, he believes that Baki will probably come for another rematch. Speaking of Baki, he is still thinking about how much his father is scolding him right now. But what is taking away his sleep is the kick that hit him, and he explains that the kick by Pickle alone gave him more pleasure than any girl in the world. Baki thinks that the kick was a sign of friendship and believes that he and Pickle are now buddies. He realizes that if he trains with Pickle, he might be able to finally surpass the ogres and Yujiro's strength, and maybe he will finally get the chance to revenge his mother. Meanwhile, at the Shinshikai Karate School, Ritsu begins practicing some of Katsumi's secret karate moves. First, Ritsu practices the infamous mock punch, where he explains that the power of the punch is generated by the big toes in two places, accelerated by the ankles, and then further accelerated by both knees, then by the hips and lumbars, and that power goes through the spine to the shoulders and finally reaches the wrists and the fist, delivering the ultimate blow. Ritsu knows that Katsumi used this very move once when fighting Hanayama in the previous seasons, and seeing that sent a chill up his spine. Ritsu remembers that back then, he tried to insult karate, saying his kung fu surpassed Katsumi's technique about 2,000 years ago. Although Ritsu feels bad for being arrogant, he again tells Katsumi that that is still the truth, as he believes kung fu is the superior martial arts technique because he has achieved many victories thanks to the technique that he has cultivated. In the long history of kung fu, Ritsu believes that there is only one person who has mastered the move, so he thinks that Katsumi should also be the one to master it so that he can stand a chance against Pickle. On the other side, Pain has brought 140 dozen barrels of chloroform and explains that it has 1.5 times the weight of normal air. Pain reveals that he used all of these barrels of chloroform on Pickle by surprise and filled the entire stadium grounds with it to put Pickle to sleep. Pain tells Tokugawa that he only did this so that Pickle doesn't escape like the last time. But Pain doesn't think that only this measure would be enough to contain the primitive man and decides to build an urgent facility that can properly contain him. Pain tells both the captain and Tokugawa that they cannot forget their incredible fortune in encountering this miraculous specimen, which is Pickle, and must do what is needed as that is their responsibility. The captain knows that, without a doubt, Pickle is a superclass S-rank research specimen, but even he knows that at the very end, Pain should not make him his guinea pig since Pickle is also a human being with a personality and feelings. So, he tells Pain not to treat Pickle as if he were some kind of research sample. Tokugawa also agrees with the captain and comes up with an idea that would no longer take them any need to lock Pickle inside a facility. He claims that Pickle won't leave this stadium ever because, after he kicked Baki, during the few hours before he was put to sleep with the chloroform, he didn't make a single move to leave. Even though Pickle has the strength to burst down a steel door, he stayed here of his own accord. So, Tokugawa believes that Pickle thinks of this place as an oasis, as he gets to fight the people who resemble the dinosaurs of his Jurassic era. So, Tokugawa thinks that Pickle believes that as long as he stays here, he will never run out of food or companions. So, Tokugawa is convinced that when Pickle wakes up from his sleep, he won't try to escape unless he gets to fight more strong people like Ritsu, Hanayama, and Baki. Pickle wakes up from his sleep even when he is covered by the dense chloroform fog, which doesn't surprise Pain anymore. Pickle then looks around, and Tokugawa realizes that he is actually looking for food or someone to play with. So, Tokugawa tells Pickle to wait a little longer and promises him that he will bring him his food and a friend. In addition, Tokugawa tells Pickle to go back to sleep, but Pain doesn't think that Pickle understands anything that Tokugawa is saying. But Pickle proves him wrong and willingly goes back to sleep to wait until someone formidable shows up. Meanwhile, Baki clenches his fists hard and reveals that inside his fists is a piece of newspaper. He reveals that before, he could never hide a single page of a newspaper, but now he is able to completely hide it inside his fist. So, that makes him believe that he has grown stronger, and he takes an oath to let out his newfound strength the next time he gets a chance to fight Pickle. On the other hand, Ritsu and Katsumi watch a clip of a bullet, and Katsumi shows Ritsu that the bullet in the clip is creating shockwaves as it moves forward. Katsumi explains that, just like a wave of a bullet, similar lines appear on jet airplanes, proving that it has reached Mach speed. Apparently, only gunpowder or jet engines can achieve that supersonic Mach speed. So to achieve the same speed on the Mach punch, Katsumi reveals that they would need a special black whip. He explains that if the leather rope is used just right, the tip of the whip can break even Mach speed. Katsumi even demonstrates it to Ritsu, and the hit of the whip makes a deafening crack noise, implying that it has reached supersonic speed. Katsumi then films the movement of the whip and watches it on super slow motion with Ritsu. Katsumi sees that the widening circle the whip makes is the moment that the tip breaks the Mach speed, so that Ritsu now finally understands the motion. Katsumi now demonstrates the same technique of the whip by using his bare hands to complete the Mach punch. First, he fully uses his 10 joints, stretches both of his legs to almost 180-degree angle, and then twists each joint, and also the backbone of his spine to accelerate his speed, and breaks Mach speed with his punch. Katsumi then asks Ritsu if his Mach punch would be enough to pierce through Pickle's thick muscle tissue. Ritsu still doesn't think it will be enough, and he believes that the Mach punch can be improved even more. He explains there is potential for adding even more speed and weight to his fist. Katsumi claims to already know that, and this time he even uses his head to increase the speed of his Mach punch. Ritsu is left impressed and finally understands why people once called Katsumi the lethal weapon. It is all thanks to Katsumi's father, Doppo, as he is even mightier than Katsumi. Ritsu knows the story of a Japanese man who once upon a time traveled to the People's Republic of China. That Japanese man fought numerous matches against many martial artists, and came out victorious every time. That man was Doppo Arachi, and he became famous in all over China for his strength. When Doppo returned to his own country, he visited a circus and saw a child performer there. Seeing the child, Doppo became sympathetic and purchased him from the circus. However, Doppo was also intimidated by the skills of the child and realized that one day the kid would surpass his own. That was the main reason he bought the boy from the circus, to make him his ally. That child is none other than Katsumi, and he feels glad that he was adopted by Doppo. Ritsu tells him that he has deserved it since he is now a perfect weapon who can even strike at supersonic speed. A certain individual reveals having eavesdropped on their conversation and finally shows himself to them. Ritsu gets surprised to see that it was Master Kaku, who is the only person who mastered Kung Fu other than him. Ritsu asks Kaku why he came here without any prior notice and tells him that if he had contacted him, he would have personally come to the airport to escort him here. Katsumi asks Ritsu who this old, small man is, and Ritsu introduces him as the great master of Kung Fu, who is 146 years old. After the introduction, Kaku tells Katsumi that the Mach punch he is referring to as perfect is below average to him. He tells both Katsumi and Ritsu that there are other ways to achieve perfection and gives them an egg attached to a thin rope, so that he can show them what is the real perfect Mach punch. He takes his position and at the blink of an eye, he slices the egg and eats the yolk inside. Kaku then explains that one can gain more speech than a bullet if they use all of their bones to accelerate their speed. So, after learning the technique, Katsumi begins to practice the Mach punch, but he isn't satisfied even with the increased speed. He recalls Kaku's instructions, and according to him, the speed should have no limits because one could just imagine increasing their bone structure to increase their overall speed. So, Katsumi imagines increasing his bones joints, and with the power of anime, he finally achieves the same speed as Kaku. Meanwhile, Ritsu and Doppo treats Master Kaku to a grand dinner. At the dinner, Doppo asks Kaku why he is interested in his foolish son who doesn't even know what he is doing. Ritsu claims that Katsumi is not the same person as before and that he has turned out to be quite powerful. Kaku also believes that Katsumi is a natural genius and he probably has already surpassed him in mastering the Mach punch. That is in fact true, as Katsumi has broken all limits, and with his one single punch, he shatters all of the window glasses of the building. His subordinates see the buildings shaking and comes there to see if something happened to their master. But Katsumi assures them that everything is fine. On the other hand, Baki decides to have a practice battle with an imaginary opponent to train himself, and that imaginary enemy is a dinosaur. While jogging in the streets, Katsumi remembers the conversation he had with Tokugawa moments earlier, as he finally feels ready. He requests Tokugawa to give him a chance to fight Pickle. Tokugawa is surprised to hear his wish and asks him if he knows what fighting Pickle means. Katsumi already knows that if he fights Pickle, there's a good chance he will get eaten by him if he loses to him. Still, Katsumi wants to take that risk and again requests Tokugawa to let him be Pickle's food. After some persuasion, Tokugawa finally agrees but gives him two conditions. One, that the fight will start at 6 a.m. in the morning, and the other that it will be held at the stadium. Katsumi, of course, agrees to the conditions and is now actually running to the stadium to fight Pickle. Once he reaches the stadium, Katsumi finds his mother standing next to Tokugawa. He asks his mother what she is doing here, and she explains that she cannot miss her son's final battle. Since this is an important match, Katsumi's mother also claims to have invited the person who is most important to him. But Katsumi doesn't care who she has invited, as the most important person is actually his mother. So he hugs her, telling her not to worry about him. After that interaction, his mother leaves the place, bidding her goodbyes when the person she invited reveals themselves. It's another woman who Katsumi recognizes at first glance as his birth mother. He remembers 15 years ago at the circus show when Doppo bought him for a lot of money. Apparently Doppo was amazed when he visited that circus when he saw a 5-year-old prodigy's physical ability and talent. At that circus event, Katsumi's actual father died in an accident while doing a stunt with a lion. So Doppo and his wife bought Katsumi from his birth mother and began taking care of him and raising him. Coming back to the present, Katsumi hugs his birth mother, even though he should be despising her for selling him to a stranger. But Katsumi feels no hate towards her, as he is glad that he now has two mothers instead of one beside him, and happily enters the stadium. Before he enters the arena, he sees a Baki, drenched in his own blood, standing against the wall. Baki looks at Katsumi and smiles, implying that he just finished the fight with the imaginary dinosaur. Baki tells Katsumi that he will go fight Pickle after him, and he feels kind of jealous that Katsumi gets to be the first one to fight Pickle. However, Katsumi is glad that he is the first one, as he believes that he should be the only one to fight him. After passing through Baki, Katsumi sees that his father, Doppo, is literally blocking his path. Katsumi ignores Doppo and proceeds to walk to the arena, telling his father that he needs not to worry about him. As he reaches the arena, Katsumi activates a technique called Sei. Sei is a straight mid-level strike, which is the most basic of the fundamentals of Japanese karate. Its existence is more than a technique, and it is the very symbol of art itself. That symbol now gathers in a group of 55,000 and is rained down on Katsumi as everyone is assembled here at the stadium to inspire their young leader. A single punch from these 55,000 apprentices combines into a huge shockwave and hits Katsumi, making his heart shiver. He feels the burden as he now realizes that he cannot afford to lose anymore and approaches Pickle. As Pickle comes out of his locked room like an angry bull, Katsumi doesn't waste his time at all and blasts Pickle with many mock punches. He hits the jaw, the chest, the ribs, and most importantly, the groin, to make sure that he has a greater advantage. But all the vital hits do no harm to Pickle, as he doesn't give off any single expression of pain and comes to attack Katsumi again. So, Katsumi kicks him in the nuts again and then immediately follows up with a knee kick to the jaw. Seeing his attacks, Tokugawa realizes that Katsumi is no longer the same weakling as before and has become a lot stronger. Baki also recognizes that and wonders if he can surpass Katsumi, let alone Pickle, in strength. Pickle begins to smile with his mouth wide open, implying that he feels happy having such a strong opponent, or rather, a strong prey. Ritsu realizes that these attacks won't be enough to take down the greatest fighter of the Jurassic era of dinosaurs, so he hopes for Katsumi to survive. Pickle hits Katsumi with a kick like a dump truck and deals a lot of damage with that one attack. Katsumi struggles to get up and begins to tremble in pain. But with the power of friendship, he again gains the courage to stand up. But Pickle's smile disappears as he no longer considers Katsumi as his opponent, and has elevated him from his plaything to his food. In the Jurassic era, Pickle only ate the mightiest of enemies and alone continued to defy the law that was defined by God. In the midst of the lawlessness, it was only his ruling, and he soon became the king amongst the dinosaurs. And now, as another mighty enemy stands in front of Pickle, he takes the same stance that he once used to beat the dinosaurs. Baki recognizes the stance as the same as his father's, Yujiro's, and wonders how they resemble each other so much. Ritsu asks Master Kaku if he thinks Katsumi will survive, and in reply, Kaku explains that if he were in the place of Katsumi, he would try to stop Pickle's heart, as he thinks that is the only way to defeat him. It's as if Katsumi has heard what Kaku just said, and he goes for his most powerful machine punch on Pickle's chest to stop his heart. Pickle begins to feel pain finally and compares this attack by Katsumi to the swing of the steel tail of his rival, T-Rex. The Mach Punch creates such a shockwave that it shakes the entire stadium, and everyone gazes their eyes at Pickle to see if he finally took some damage. As Pickle falls on his knees, the crowd cheers for Katsumi, assuming that the battle is now over. Pickle, for the first time in the 190 million years of his life, has felt an unfamiliar pain in his belly, and that deadly strike makes him salivate uncontrollably. However, Katsumi knows that if Pickle stands up again, he is as good as dead because, since Katsumi used the Mach Punch at the maximum speed, he destroyed his delicate fists. But Katsumi is happy as he almost got the upper hand on the strongest fighter of humanity, and with a smile, he kicks Pickle on the face as he starts standing up. Then, Katsumi uses the other uninjured arm with another blazing hot Mach Punch at Pickle's face and knocks Pickle out completely. As Pickle falls flat on the ground this time, everyone in the stands cheers for Katsumi and screams in victory. However, the battle is far from over, and Katsumi has destroyed his own 2 arms and 1 leg to hit those deadly attacks. Baki and Tokugawa wonder why Katsumi's fists got destroyed, so the mad scientist Pain comes to do the explanation and tells both of them that once something breaks the sound barrier, the burden of the acceleration makes the object and the machine's speed fail to withstand the less to zero resistance of air. And in a similar way, before Katsumi's punch reached Pickle, his hands started to destroy because they couldn't withstand the resistance of the air barrier. Baki realizes that it's over for Katsumi as Pickle is starting to recover and will soon get up. Pickle, with an evil smile on his face, gets up to feed on his prey, and Baki wonders if there is even a way to defeat this primitive man. Pain tells Baki that these martial artists made no mistakes in attacking Pickle, but since Pickle is from the Jurassic era, he is used to these blows as he fought the primitive beings every single day of his life. Ritsu sees that Pickle is taking the same stance that he used to deliver the final blow to him at their match. Katsumi looks at his subordinates, who are in disbelief, and begins to laugh as he fails to defeat the primitive man even though he made no mistakes with his attacks. But Katsumi tells everyone not to worry, as he still claims to have a trump card up his sleeve. So, he stands up and prepares to strike his final attack as Pickle dashes towards him at bullet speed, and then he uses a Mach Punch again on Pickle. But this time, the delivery is more like whipping Pickle with his fingers. Because of the whip-like attack, it created more shockwaves, and thus, Pickle once again fell flat on the ground. But because of that reckless attack, Katsumi's right arm muscle tears completely, and the only things left in his hands are his bones. But Katsumi doesn't feel any pain, as he is the one left standing and holding his hands high, showing his victory to everyone. Everyone once again cheers for their leader, and even Master Kaku and Baki get amazed at such remarkable talent. Katsumi bows to everyone, expressing his gratitude, and he gets much respect in return. However, Katsumi soon realizes that he actually failed to knock out Pickle, and he is actually asleep as he sees Pickle rolling over on the ground. Baki wonders why Pickle fell asleep if he wasn't defeated, and the scientist, Pain, again comes to give him an explanation, telling him that since Pickle is a primitive man, he thought his prey's life was already over as he saw Katsumi's bone sticking out hand, so he went to sleep to wait for his opponent to die naturally. Katsumi notices that Pickle is crying in the middle of his sleep, and that makes him remember what Tokugawa once told him. Apparently, Pickle only cries for his strong opponents because he loves them, and because of his love, he eats them and bids farewell. Katsumi feels proud as the strongest man since the very existence of the earth has acknowledged him as a mighty opponent. And because of that, he finally thinks that all of his efforts have paid off and gets in tears of happiness. So, he wants to repay Pickle for giving him such privileges and decides to sacrifice himself by being eaten by the primitive man. Pickle gets up from his sleep with tears in his eyes, implying that he is about to eat Katsumi. Everyone, including Kaku, can't bear to see what's coming, but what's inevitable is inevitable. Katsumi accepts his death and tells Pickle to take his life without any hesitation. So, Pickle in the blink of an eye, bites on the right arm of Katsumi and completely rips it off. Katsumi turns around and sees his arm inside Pickle's mouth. He begins to lose his consciousness because of immense loss of blood and once again tells Pickle that he has deserved to eat him as he falls on the ground and waits to be eaten. Pickle comes there to eat the rest of Katsumi, but the noble soft-hearted elder doesn't allow it like last time with Ritsu and commands his hidden snipers to shoot and tranquilize Pickle. However, Doppo doesn't like the fact that Tokugawa is going against the rules and forces him to order his gunmen to put their gun down. Doppo explains to him that saving his son today will only bring shame to him for the rest of his life, and as a father he cannot let that happen. So, Tokugawa understands what mistake he was about to make and tells his gunmen to stop. Pickle holds his palm of his hands together and acts as if he is praying for Katsumi's soul before eating him. This is the most common gesture to all of mankind, and since the human's existence, they have held their palm of the hand together to pray when faced with forces they cannot understand or control. Even when encountering unfathomable evil or inexplicable kindness, humans have brought the palm of their hands together. What lays on the ground before Pickle is although a trophy of war, but it is also his friend too. That's why Pickle held the palm of his hands to hope for his friend to reach a better place. Although Pickle is a savage, but he is still a human. The primitive man's entire life was challenging and he fought day after day to win, to eat and most importantly, to survive. In that age of constant battles, Pickle although had no scarcity of food, nor the lack of opponents, but he lacked a friend. Back then, he was fighting the heaviest of the heavyweights, so he didn't hold back. He smiled and took lives of those who were far larger and powerful than he is, and that made him proud. But now, he is facing a new and different kind of enemy, an enemy smaller than his size, an enemy of his own race, who has small feet and delicate hands. But even with a weak appearance, that small man's attacks has been more powerful than the strike of a T-Rex. That is why Pickle is expressing his acknowledgement of Katsumi's strength and thanks him wholeheartedly for sacrificing himself. Katsumi, through his own strength of will and enormous effort, had turned himself into a powerful fighter, and despite his small hands and feet, he had transformed those small, soft things into fangs, horns, and claws like the primitive beings. Such an achievement is a priceless treasure to mankind. But it was the treasure that Katsumi offered Pickle. Pickle recognizes his effort, sacrifice, weakness, treasure, friendship, and that's why Pickle for the first time in his life chooses to withdraw from the battlefield with an empty stomach. Yet, Pickle's body gets filled with a strange feeling of contentment. Later, when Pain's subordinates come to pick up Katsumi's dead body from the ground, they see that stadium that is filled with 55,000 members of Shinshikai K-Air at school moments ago are all on their knees, bowing to their late chairman and his great deeds. So, Katsumi finally has managed to achieve something great like his father Dappo. I bet he is happy in his afterlife. Unable to bear the thought of looking down on their fallen leader from above, everyone without any spoken command closes their eyes and falls on their knees. With this gesture, everyone shows their devotion and respect towards Katsumi. Anyway, the three subordinates of Pain brings Katsumi's unconscious body to Dappo and the others. Seeing Katsumi's dead body, Baki gets filled with regrets as he begins to think that if only he fought Pickle before Katsumi, things could have ended differently. No one though that this spoiled, carefree man would turn to be such an inspiring leader to so many people. Even though Dappo and Katsumi are not tied by blood, Dappo is proud of his son and is thankful that he adopted and raised such an honorable man. Dappo once thought that it was he himself who had set Katsumi on this path of revenge when he told him about Ritsu's defeat. Back then, the comment that Katsumi made saying that not underestimating is the same as underestimating. Dappo sensed that his son wasn't the naive boy he was before and had finally become a man. Dappo is right though, as Katsumi grew to be a great man who fought with his life in an unwinnable battle. So, he looks at his son again and feels proud being his father. Tokugawa senses and hears a howl of suffering coming from the center of the earth, and realizes that this is the anguish of the primitive man who just killed his friend. Pickle may be uninjured physically, but this battle clearly has left a deep wound inside him. Some days later, it's revealed that Katumi has actually survived thanks to the medical technology and no longer has his arm, just like Ritsu, who no longer has a leg. Speaking of Ritsu, he makes Chinese tea for Katsumi and serves him, saying it will help him recover quickly. Katsumi thanks him for his undying service these past days at the hospital and promises to make him tea too one day in return. Considering that Katsumi has suffered the loss of his right arm, Ritsu still expresses his envy towards him as Katsumi is now a superior fighter than him. Katsumi understands why he is envious, as he knows that any martial artist would be jealous of his talent. But Katsumi doesn't think that he deserves that much attention, as the perfect mock punch that he learned was all but thanks to Ritsu and Kaku. So, since this was not a solo effort, Katsumi thinks Ritsu shouldn't be envious of him. Just like Ritsu and Kaku, many others who carried the legacy of Kung Fu and Karate for thousands upon thousands of years never stopped evolving and improving. Thanks to the predecessors who carried on the legacy, Katsumi knows the breath and the spirit of thousands, millions of them, and those techniques cherished by so many generations now live on within him. Katsumi wants to pass this legacy to someone else so that it exists for all of eternity, and feels regret that he failed to defeat even with all the power bestowed upon him. Baki enters the hospital room with red roses and asks him how he feels losing to Pickle. Ritsu gets mad at Baki for mocking someone who not only lost in front of 55,000 of his pupil but also his arm. But Katsumi stops Ritsu from taking any unnecessary actions, telling him that it's fine. Katsumi tells Baki that he already knows that he didn't have what it takes to score a victory, so he doesn't need to mock him anymore. But Katsumi asks Baki if he thinks he has got what it takes to beat Pickle after watching the fight between Katsumi and Pickle. Baki doesn't answer his question and instead grabs all of the flowers in the palm of his hand and crushes it so hard that a droplet of rosewater falls from the crushed roses. Baki then spreads the droplet of the rosewater in his hands and then puts his hands on Katsumi's face, making him realize that Baki has grown stronger. Meanwhile, at the streets of Tokyo, the ogre himself, Yujiro, reveals to be roaming aimlessly. He is merely walking, yet everyone around him stops and stares at the ogre in fear. The only reason this is happening is because Yujiro has the presence of a wild beast. For example, when a young impala while walking alone through the African savanna comes across a cheetah, it realizes that it's as good as dead because the cheetah can accelerate from 0 to over 68 miles per hour in less than 5 seconds. The impala immediately realizes its bad luck, and the situation gets so desperate for it that its entire body freezes and it begins to tremble in fear. Just like the impala, the citizens of Tokyo are trembling in fear, as their instincts keep telling them that Yujiro is no less than a cheetah who can kill them in mere seconds. Although these people don't know who Yujiro is, and have never seen him before, but the S-City trillion cells in the body still reacts in fear before their minds could even tell them why their body is reacting that way. Anyway, Yujiro keeps moving forward and sees Doppo coming towards him. So, he asks Doppo if he has come for a fight. Doppo explains that he is not here to pick up a fight and instead wants to have a private talk with him. Both of them goes to a bar nearby, and there Doppo first treats Yujiro a glass of beer. Doppo thanks Yujiro for insulting Katsumi back when they first saw Pickle together, as he thinks that because of Yujiro's insult, something in Katsumi changed, and he turned out to be a better man. Doppo explains to Yujiro that after that interaction, his son changed his ways for better and finally became an honorable man and a leader. The bartender skillfully makes the drink for the two of them and serves it to Yujiro first. Yujiro taps the table with his fingers and makes the wine glass come floating to his mouth, flexing on the bartender. After finishing the drink, Yujiro tells Doppo that it doesn't matter if a cat has suddenly turned into a lion. Katsumi is still a pampered good-for-nothing punk in his eyes. But Yujiro admits that Katsumi did well against Pickle, revealing that he also watched the fight between them. Still, Yujiro thinks that Doppo has made a crucial mistake with Katsumi, and tells him that he was far too merciful or tolerant than expected towards him. Doppo admits that he is less strict as a father than Yujiro is to Baki, but that doesn't mean that he is a good father. Yujiro then moves on from the conversation and asks the bartender to make him a glass of a 10-year-old special wine. The bartender asks how he would like the drink, and in reply, Yujiro tells him to just hand him the bottle. He then takes the bottle in his hand, rips off the back of the bottle and pours the entire thing in a beer glass. The bartender can't believe that Yujiro is just going to drink $1,000 worth of bottle of scotch. But he can't say anything as he knows that is going to be a death wish. After drinking the entire glass of scotch, Yujiro asks Doppo if he finally admits that he was too soft on Katsumi. Doppo explains that he was indeed too busy being amazed by Katsumi's progress as a martial artist, that he forgot what kind of person he himself was. In addition, Doppo tells him that watching his son grow, develop in leaps and bounds, and seeing how easy it was for Katsumi to make such phenomenal progress in so less time, made him forget the duty as a father and as a martial artist. Doppo knows that as a martial artist, one can never be easygoing, not even to their own flesh and blood, and he has learned this lesson the hard way. Because if he treated Katsumi more strictly, just maybe he wouldn't have lost his arm against Pickle. But knowing all the principles of martial arts, Doppo still turned soft and sentimental as he watched his little boy, Katsumi, grow as a man. Yujiro lights up a cigarette and does something that causes cancer. Don't do things like Yujiro, kids, and watch anime recaps instead. Yujiro tells Doppo to not feel bad anymore, as what's important is that he has finally admitted his mistakes. Yujiro then talks about Pickle and how he was first discovered at the buried deep beneath the ground under Colorado, in an old salt mine. Now that this primitive man has revived, Yujiro believes that this signifies something. Doppo writes the details of Pickle's rebirth, how long he was asleep, and dividing it by 50, which is the total year a martial artist can fight. The answer comes to 1 in 3,800,000. So, mathematically speaking, the martial artists have only a 1 in 1.38 million chance of succeeding against Pickle. So, it's clearly a challenge for Doppo and Yujiro, as they know that only them two are strong enough to take on Pickle. After coming out of the bar, Doppo tells Yujiro that this might be the perfect chance for them to settle who is the strongest of all time by defeating the primitive man. At Baki's house, he trains against an imaginary enemy that he even can't picture properly, and reveals that he is actually imagining Pickle as his imaginary opponent. Baki wonders why he can't picture someone who he has seen with his eyes when suddenly Ritsu comes there, interrupting his training, and asks him if this is his personal training grounds. Before Baki can ask him how strong Pickle is, Ritsu tells him that both he and Katsumi doesn't have a clue about Pickle's limits. Baki begins to shake in excitement, and even his hair starts to glow just like his father, Yujiro. Baki explains that he can no longer resist the urge of fighting as he realizes that he might be the one to make Pickle reveal his true potential. So, he decides to fight Pickle the very next morning. In the meantime, Jack comes there to fight with the primitive man, thinking he out of all people can beat him. Jack sees Pickle sitting still even after seeing him, so he tells him to get up quickly. Pickle gets irritated by this sudden interruption and gets up, wondering why this foolish man has come here to end his life. Jack shows off his jacked body by taking off his clothes and getting ready to fight the primitive man. Pickle breaks out in a grin as he understands why Jack is here and begins to feel blessed for being in a place where he can fight beings who resemble the strength of the dinosaurs of the Jurassic era. So, he feels delighted that another unbelievably fantastic toy has arrived for him to play with. Pickle knows that Jack is different from Ritsu or Katsumi, as he has never seen an athletic type of fighter before. Until now, he has only fought traditional martial artists, which is why he feels excited to play with this new toy. As Jack rushes to Pickle and hits him with a punch, the ferocity brings back a nostalgic memory of Pickle. Seeing Pickle unscathed after taking the direct blow right to the face, Jack realizes that it's because Pickle's bone structure has a toughness that is equal to that of a water buffalo. But what interests him even more is the fact that Pickle has primal canine teeth, because even after that punch, those teeth haven't moved a single bit. So, Jack believes that those canine teeth are actually fangs, a deadly weapon. That makes Jack jealous, and he also opens his mouth to imitate Pickle's expression and tells him that this will be a bite-off challenge. Jack reveals that he has been practicing biting for a long time, and because of that, his biting power has developed so much that he can bite an actual hard coconut to shreds. Jack is certain that Pickle used his fangs to bit through the armor of dinosaurs in the Jurassic era, so he wonders which is stronger, the armor or the coconut shell. Though unable to understand what Jack is saying, Pickle senses everything. Just like a newborn baby understands its mother's heart. It's also like two lovers who have approached one another without exchanging words. So Pickle understands what is about to happen. As they both come towards each other and clash with their teeth, a bright light illuminates the entire stadium. On the other side of Baki's house, he makes a call to the noble elder, Tokugawa, asking him to give him a chance to fight Pickle tomorrow morning. But Tokugawa doesn't pay much attention to what Baki's saying, as his gaze is locked in on Jack and Pickle's battle right now. He sees that both Jack and Pickle are having a kind of intimate kiss and tells Baki about what he is seeing right now. Jack tries to overpower Pickle by grabbing onto his hair, but Pickle isn't going down so easily. He literally lifts Jack off the ground using his one hand and begins to swing him ferociously at a 360-degree angle until Jack's entire mouth gets ripped off. Baki learns about Jack's defeat and thinks that it is very humiliating that the Earth's strongest fighters are being just toyed with like that. As Pickle proceeds to eat the bitten mouth part of Jack, he sees that Jack is still alive and eager for more fights. Jack smiles even though his face is torn off and turns around to hit Pickle with a surprising punch. But Jack realizes that it's not enough because Pickle's jaw itself feels like it has a weight of 200 kilos. So, even though he used all his muscles, bones, breath, and all his capabilities to their fullest in throwing his best punch, he failed to even send a quiver through Pickle's skull. Tokugawa also wonders why Jack's mighty strike didn't knock Pickle down. It's as if Pickle is getting even stronger by the day. Pain reveals that he has been watching the fight since before Tokugawa arrived here and tells him that it's no time to be stunlocked anymore as Pickle has taken his attack stance again, which he used to instantly defeat the Sea King, Ritsu. Pain tells Tokugawa that the punch that Jack hit Pickle with moments ago has probably fired him up, and that is why he is probably riled up to finish this quickly. Another way to look at it is that Jack pushed Pickle to his limit after a mere 2 punches. Baki and Ritsu rush to the stadium to see the fight between Jack and Pickle, and they have reached the place at the right time as Pickle is just about to use his finishing move. Everyone stands in awe as they see Pickle quickly jumping on his prey. However, Jack is actually jacked up as he easily blocks Pickle's attack and flings him way over to the stands. However, because Jack's face is torn off, the doping starts to have maximum effects, and every muscle in Jack's body begins twitching abruptly. Although Pickle is flung 15 to 20 meters away, he still remains unharmed and gets up once again. Seeing that, Baki realizes that he came here too late, and that realization begins to transform into pain. Jack comes behind Pickle, grabbing him by the hair, and begins to smash his head on the ground. While doing so, he asks Pickle if modern humans have evolved or devolved. Of course, Pickle doesn't answer his question, so Jack slams him back to the stadium ground and kicks him on the face, asking him if he can feel what Jack is thinking. Jack tells him that he has lived his life for good: food, drinks, women, money, status, and glory. But now he claims to have abandoned all those things and only has one purpose left. As Jack kicks Pickle in the face again, he tells him that although he is satisfied with his life, he just wants one thing, and that is to become the strongest fighter. He tells Pickle how he has never quit practicing to the point of incontinence and has taken drugs to become stronger until he nearly died. He wanted to grow larger and bigger, which is why he even used bone lengthening artificially and obtained a bigger height in exchange for intense pain and a lot of money. According to Jack, all he eats and drinks contributes greatly to obtaining strength, and the struggles that he has been through all his life come down to this moment. Because he now represents the modern era of mankind, he again asks Pickle if he is good enough to be the strongest of the modern era. Jack then finally properly opens his mouth, coughs up something, and gives it to Pickle. Pickle looks at the thing and sees that it's a cut-off ear. Although the primitive man has never seen a mirror in his life, he still realizes that the cut-off ear is his own ear. So, when both of them were in the middle of the biting battle, Jack must have bit it off. Right at that moment, Pickle hears a sound suddenly, but it's not a sound but the soundlessness of silence. The silence in his missing left ear. That silence makes him feel hatred, as the man standing in front of him stole a part of him. Seeing Pick mad makes Jack happy, and he comes to punch Pickle again. But unlike every other time, Pickle dodges it at the last second without even moving a single inch. Pain realizes something and tells Tokugawa that Pickle must finally be showing his true powers. But Jack doesn't realize that, goes for a kick, and misses once again. He steps back, questioning how someone can dodge an attack by not even moving a muscle. Pain realizes that Pickle must be using a secret technique from the Jurassic era to evade these attacks, and that gets him even more intrigued. Jack realizes that Pickle did move when he attacked him, but he moved so quickly to dodge the attack that the naked eye could not even see it. Jack remembers the story of a wild cat and a human who apparently had to fight in a locked cage. The cat had many weapons that humans lacked, like claws, fangs, and quick reflexes. But most of all, the cat possessed the motor coordination and speed that are the two aspects to which humans are far inferior. So, without a weapon, the human failed to make up the gap between him and the cat. Even when the human was dozens of times heavier than the cat, he was afraid of the ferocious cat and failed to win against it. A similar thing to that story is happening between Jake and Pickle as well. Because Pickle is more like a dinosaur who learned to match up with the speed of a dinosaur. He has become the same as a dinosaur. And Jake realizes that he is not fighting against a human but a dinosaur. So, he begins to pray to God to give him the strength to survive this losing battle. But God seems to be at Pickle's side as Pickle finishes off Jack and begins doing his victory dance. Then Pickle begins to cry right after, as he now needs to eat Jack. Tokugawa can't take it anymore, as he greatly admires Jack. So, he wants to intervene, but before he can, Baki runs there to stop Pickle. But before he can even reach him, Pickle hallucinates an ancient insect on top of Jack, so he backs off in fear, and goes back to his sleeping place. To explain why this happened, we have to go back in time to 200 million years ago, when Pickle was still in his youth. One day, he was assaulted by an enemy smaller than him for the first time. After struggling to even touch the enemy, Pickle eventually killed the little bee-like being and ate it. But a sudden shock took over him, as if his mouth had suddenly turned into an erupting volcano, spilling magma. He jumped all around in pain and even lost the ability to move. Of course, that was the venom of the bee, which Pickle didn't understand. So he took an oath not to kill the small creature anymore. And now, looking at Jack, Pickle also thought that he was a bee filled with venom, which is why he backed off. I mean, he is right because Jack's whole body is filled with self-harming drugs and steroids. Anyway, Baki doesn't understand why Pickle sat down and didn't eat Jack. But there's no time to think about that, as they need to save Jack's life first. Tokugawa goes near Jack to see why Pickle became afraid. But as he touches Jack, a sudden subconscious middle finger attack by Jack hits him. Baki finally realizes why Pickle backed off, as Pickle must have sensed that too. That if he continued on and touched Jack, Jack's middle finger would have pierced through both of his ears and most likely severed his medulla. However, Tokugawa only survived that because he was short. So, everyone should be proud of being a part of the short gang. Later at the hospital, Jack gets his face patched up by the doctor, and for the time being, he needs to stay like this until he recovers. The doctor orders the nurse to run antibiotics and all the painkillers in Jack's IV, and tells them to replace Jack's bandages every 12 hours. After doing the tiresome operation, the doctor returns to his chamber and takes a seat to talk with Tokugawa and Pain. Tokugawa apologizes to the doctor first for giving him a sudden notice on this and thanks him for doing all he could to save Jack. The doctor claims that Jack will be fine and there will be just some big scars on his face. In addition, the doctor mentions that Jack's cervical spine has suffered a heavy damage, but there's no need to worry as there are no visible neurological issues. Tokugawa then tells the doctor about Jack's middle finger attack and asks him how he did it even after losing consciousness. The doctor thinks for a while and then comes to a conclusion that even when he lost his consciousness, Jack must have taken an action subconsciously. The doctor explains that all human apparently take action even after they lose their lives and gives an example by telling both Pain and Tokugawa the story that took place under the special circumstances of war. In the midst of war, Soldier captured the soldiers of the enemy's domain using bows and arrows and swords. Since it was wartime, the enemy soldiers were immediately sentenced to death by the general. As those soldiers awaited for their deaths by decapitation, the commanding officer of the captured soldiers made a proposal to the general to save his subordinates. He claimed that after he gets beheaded, he will pick up his head and run down the line of my troops. He then told the general to spare all his men if he is able to do what he claims. The general agreed to his deal, wanting to see how things would turn out, even though he didn't believe in such stupidity and laughed at the absurd proposal. The commanding soldier then was immediately put to death, and once he was beheaded, unbelievably he picked up his severed head and began running down the whole line of his troops while carrying his own head. Since this is a true story, the doctor believes that something similar happened with Jack too, and he took oath to use the middle finger attack on Pickle before he became unconscious. The doctor thinks that Jack must have engraved his pain of losing into every corner of every cell in his body, and that's how he used that attack. The door behind the doctor suddenly opens and the nurse comes in claiming that the patient, Jack, is missing from the hospital. Although Payne can't believe that Jack would escape, let alone waking up. But the doctor believes that Jack must have went back to Pickle to deal with the unfinished business. His assumptions are true as Jack immediately goes to the stadium and bows down to Pickle to apologize to him. He feels sorry for having to leave in the middle of their fight. That's why he wants to continue once again and kicks Pickle right on his face. Jack keeps kicking Pickle, telling him to continue, but it seems that Pickle is not interested anymore as he doesn't fight back. After taking 5 consecutive kicks to the face from Jack's powerful legs, Pickle begins to crawl back as he still doesn't want to fight him. In his era, Pickle had fought daily with Beast 100 times of his own weight, but now he fears to fight the person smaller than him. Pickle proceeds to run away from Jack, and it's explained by the narrator that the only reason Pickle is afraid of Jack is because Pickle thought Jack was dead already. But after seeing him in perfect condition, Pickle thinks that Jack won't die even he kills him, so he thinks that there's no point in fighting him. What he doesn't know is that Jack Hanma is an unusual athlete who has ingested an obscene amount of drugs to get himself jacked and willingly cut off 4 of his limbs for the bone lengthening surgery. That's why Jack fearlessly returned to the stadium to fight. He truly has no expectations for the future and lives purely for the present. Anyway, Jack keeps pursuing Pickle out of the stadium until Pickle finally gives up on the idea of running away and finally decides to fight Jack to make him go away. In rage, Pickle sends Jack rolling on the air and crashing his head first on the ground, and that gains the attraction of the crowd. It's a defeat that Jack has brought to himself, and once he opens up his eyes, he finds himself in the hospital again with his broken mouth patched up. Tokugawa explains to Jack that this is the same hospital that he was in the morning and warns him not to pursue Pickle again like before. Tokugawa in pain tells him that he has done already enough and survived after encountering the unparalleled world treasure. Seeing Jack's frustration, Pain tells him that if he gets injured again, there will be no chance of saving him again. But still, Jack comes out of his hospital bed and goes to the hallway to escape. But Baki Hanma blocks his path to stop his brother from making another mistake. Baki makes it clear that it's over and tells Jack that he is through as a fighter. Apparently, after Pickle defeated Jack the second time, he began to cry as he wanted to eat Jack, but he resisted the urge and carried him back to the top of a tower. Although it is a heroic deed by Pickle, but it's quite disgrace to Jack as a warrior, being helped by his enemy. Anyway, Pickle carried and handled Jack with care so that he doesn't accidentally drop him or cause him any more injury. However, Pickle revealed that he was not trying to save Jack and rather was preserving him to be eaten later as he hanged him out in the sun. Baki tells all of that to Jack, and he gets dismayed learning that he was about to become a fermented meal of Pickle. So, he begins to scream in pain, realizing that he just cost himself the biggest disgrace for a fighter. After some time, Tokugawa and Yujiro holds a tea party for themselves, and there they discuss about all the things that happened recently. In the meantime, Baki and Pickle faces each other at the stadium for their most awaited fight without any audience. Tokugawa asks Yujiro if he thinks his son Baki would win against Pickle. But knowing that the great Kung Fu master, the Sea King, Ritsu, the Reborn karate master, Katsumi Orachi, and then the Physical Beast Jack Hanma was defeated, Yujiro isn't too sure anymore. So, instead Yujiro proceeds to eat the small yet delicious meal arranged by Tokugawa. Then, he tells Tokugawa that Baki is actually better than the 3 losers who got spanked by Pickle, and that's because he has Yujiro's blood running inside him. But Tokugawa tells him that Jack is also his son, then why did he fail? So, Yujiro makes up an excuse, claiming that the Hanma family blood runs thin in Jack, and that's the only reason he failed. Well, actually, Yujiro means that if someone fails to win, they don't deserve to be called a Hanma. Tokugawa moves on from Baki's topic and asks Yujiro if he himself doesn't want to fight the primitive man. Yujiro expresses his urge to do so, but he wants Baki to defeat Pickle first, but if that brat fails, then Yujiro wants to step in to end it. On the other side, Baki sits at the stadium, waiting for Pickle to attack him. He soon realizes that Pickle is not attacking him because he is not hungry yet, and once the tummy begins to growl, the hunter will come for its prey. On the other side, Pain reveals to Tokugawa that he has managed to revitalize the frozen T-Rex's meat and wants Pickle to eat that from now on. Tokugawa thinks that they should preserve such treasure, but Pain believes that Pickle is the one who deserves the T-Rex corpse as he is more important. So, Pain's subordinate brings the T-Rex meat to Pickle and he immediately begins to eat it with joy. Pickle then offers the raw meat to Baki as well, so Baki hesitantly takes it, and after eating it, he doesn't think that the meat tastes too bad. Baki thanks Pickle for the treat and asks him what kind of meat even is this. However, he gets no answer, so he proceeds eating, and once both of them are full, they sit on the ground and chill. Baki realizes that now that Pickle is full, he will no longer want to fight him, which is the goal of Pain, as he no longer wants to bear any harm to any other humans. Pain reveals to Tokugawa that his team is working restlessly to reproduce the T-Rex meat using bioengineering, and if they succeed, Pickle will never ever attack anyone again. The T-Rex meat that teeth they have in the preserve will take Pickle 2 years to consume all of it, so they can rest assured for the next 2 years and peacefully work on the reproduction process. Tokugawa later tells the information to Hanayama and asks him what he thinks of this idea. Hanayama tells from his experience that Pickle is actually on the human side, as he too was in physical contact with Pickle even though it was for a short time. Hanayama explains that Pickle loves a good contest of strength, and just like when the finest of men and the finest of women are in the same room, they can't remain strangers. Hanayama thinks that something similar would happen with Pickle and Baki. Speaking of Baki, he gets up and comes toward Pickle as he has come up with an idea to provoke Pickle into fighting him. Baki comes real close to Pickle and puts his hand on Pickle's cheeks, the other one, guys. But the subtle touch somehow infuriates Pickle, so he comes to attack Baki. It's the same as in a UFC match where an MMA fighter named Lorian Grassi had won the tournament for the first time. His opponent in the first match was a mysterious fighter named Timo, although Lorian was predicted to win. But it was a shockingly tough fight between them. Lorian barely won the match and was so exhausted that he lost his sight and forfeited the second fight. Timo in the meantime exceeded all expectations, and when asked the secret behind his strength, he said that he only used all of his strength in his body in the fight with Lorian because he apparently touched him on the cheek gently just like Baki, and that was infuriating and insulting for him. So, the gentle touch of Baki to the cheeks was actually an insult, and that is why Pickle is so mad at him. Baki thanks Pickle for getting mad at him and begins the most awaited fight by kicking him away. This time, Pickle is not fighting Baki to eat, but because he wants to defend his pride. So, Baki thinks Pickle has finally evolved. Baki then again hits Pickle with a deadly overhead kick and makes him fall on the ground when Ritsu, Hanayama, Tokugawa comes to the stadium to observe the fight. They find Pickle knocked on the ground because of Baki's kick, and Ritsu appraises his kick as extremely fruitful and majestic. While Pickle is knocked down, Baki wraps up some bandages on his wrists, and then on his ankles after taking his shoes off. Then, Baki shows his jacked abs and gets ready to fight Pickle even more seriously. He begins to kick Pickle immediately, telling him that their fight will be to kill or to be killed. Baki then begins to stomp on Pickle with his feet, and that makes Tokugawa question if Baki intends to kill Pickle. Pickle begins to crawl back as he is being owned, but Baki isn't letting him go and begins to strangle him with his arms around his neck. However, that just gets Pickle pumped up, and he finally shows a glimpse of his powers by pushing Baki away in bullet speed. So, Baki holds onto Pickle and jumps with him to the ceiling to perform a move called skydive. Ritsu and the others don't think that Baki will remain unharmed, as both of them are way too high, and the crash can kill them both. But still, Baki, because of his Hanma blood, proceeds to use this crazy move and crashes on the ground head first with Pickle. But none of them even take any damage, and instead they both stand up again. Pickle realizes something and comes close to Baki to grab his face, thinking Baki is conscious. However, Baki slaps his hand away, showing that he is still conscious. But Baki reveals that he is actually in immense pain because of the impact of falling from 30 meters, and he feels that his internal organs are in total chaos because of the shock of hitting the ground. He feels like his diaphragm is being forced up as far as it will go and crushing his lungs, which explains why Baki is unable to inhale any oxygen. He even gets blood on his mouth coming from the insides, but he gobbles it up again as he cannot show himself to be weak in front of his opponent. With so much damage, Baki desperately wants to just fall on his knees and collapse on the ground, as he also feels that his legs are holding up a giant boulder. Ritsu also realizes that Baki is badly hurt because no human can endure the pain of falling from that height. Hanayama also realizes that and is surprised to see that Baki is still able to stand. Just like Hanayama, Pickle is also surprised to see that Baki is enduring his pain. He sees through Baki and realizes that his playmate's tough act is just camouflage. Pickle senses the truth that the son of Ogre, Baki, has suffered grave physical damage, and that inside, Baki is writhing in pain. The primitive man feels regret that he has to attack a helpless, defenseless friend. So, he falls on his knees, realizing that he may have gone too far with it and treated his plaything too roughly. So, to reconcile, Pickle holds out his arms and makes a gesture that basically says please get better. However, Baki considers that as an insult, as he cannot let the humiliation of his opponent praying for him. And so, he smacks Pickle's hand away. As Baki's pride takes over his pain, he begins to attack Pickle, and even though he can barely speak because all of his bones are broken inside, Baki still tells Pickle not to pray for him. Although Baki momentarily had forgotten his overwhelming pain because of his pride, but because of his movements right now, he no longer can endure it and realizes that his lungs have been crushed. Still, he musters up some strength, and again tells Pickle loudly to not look down on him. Pickle realizes that Baki isn't going down without a fight, so he gets up to end this quickly. Baki tells him to come at him already, and Pickle almost attacks him with an unavoidable punch. But instead he hits Baki with a gentle punch on his left and right cheek with a smile. Although Tokugawa doesn't understand what is going on, the experienced fighters instantly understands what Pickle means. Pickle is actually trying to tell Baki that he will be safe pretending his fists aren't lethal weapons, and also insults him just like Baki did when he tapped him gently on his face. Pickle's plan is successful as Baki gets mad at him and gets ready to fight once again. In the past, Baki's endorphins had been triggered by physical damage or the danger of any physical damage. But now the endorphins have gotten triggered because the brain reacted to the absence of the danger. Pickle's playful punches would have not hurt even a small fly, but it has struck Baki's most vulnerable weak point, and that is his pride. So, he begins to walk away from Pickle in shame, and then again attempts to make another 30 meters jump to commit suicide. While falling down to his death, Baki apologizes to everyone for not living up to their expectations and also apologizes to Pickle for making him worry. Since Baki is the one who started this fight, he feels ashamed of himself that he was the one who ended up getting pitied. But once Baki falls to the ground, he doesn't die and sits like nothing happened. He proves to Pickle that he no longer needs to pity him, as he shows that he is not a weakling. He then tells Pickle to fight him like a man, even though he himself is not acting like one since his legs are shaking in pain. Pickle gets confused, wondering what he should do, as he realizes that Baki is camouflaging his pain with literally death. While he is still confused, Baki begins to attack Pickle, and with 2 deadly blows to his neck, Baki knocks him down on the ground. But yet again, like every other time, Pickle stands up. But this time, he falls to the ground before reaching Baki, which makes everyone wonder what the hell is even going on. Ritsu believes that Baki has figured out Pickle's weak points, which is why he struck him with just the surface of the skin. Ritsu explains that the punch doesn't land in this way, and grazes the skin, and actually it's a technique used in a boxing ring that immediately makes the opponent go down. These unexplainable knockouts have been known to happen, and the flicker punch move is actually more effective than a regular punch. Ritsu tells Tokugawa that someone who can withstand a punch without cushioning will black out when only the cushion is struck. Although a thin layer of skin on the unguarded jaw is just grazed, the blow is so fast it shakes the jaw and also the brain at a super high speed invisible to the naked eye. So, Ritsu believes that Baki intentionally grazed Pickle with a flicker punch and once his left fist, right fist, and then the heel of his foot grazed Pickle's jaw. Pickle's brain started vibrating with the first blow, and the speed of the vibrations increased with the second and the third blow, causing Pickle to have a huge concussion. Once he lost the normal functioning of his brain, Pickle must have felt alarmed and puzzled as one minute he is untouched, unhurt and standing upright, and then the next minute, he is falling on the ground. So, Ritsu believes that Baki's attack is something that is completely outside Pickle's prior experience, which is why he is in a state of utter confusion. Pickle finally stands up, and this time he no longer looks down on Baki and instead watches in amazement as the man who looks to be on the verge of death has suddenly transformed himself into a sorcerer. Of course, Pickle is thinking that because he isn't familiar with the trick that Baki used to knock him down. So, thinking that Baki is something supernatural, Pickle begins to tremble in fear, yet he doesn't run like last time he did with Jake and desires to overcome the sensation that is happening to him. He has already overcome the strong blows by being used to fight with a T-Rex. He has overcome weight, strength, danger, and even the venom from a bee sting. Now in the modern era, he has defeated many martial artists, and has overcome pain too thanks to that. But this time, the sensation is different. This is a new experience beyond Pickle's comprehension. The unprecedented experience of his body slamming into the ground twice makes him wonder why Baki can make him just fall like that even without touching his feet. The primitive man thinks to himself that he stands no chance against this little sorcerer who can literally move the ground beneath him, so he still considers not attacking Baki. On the other hand, Baki realizes that he can't attack Pickle head-on since he hasn't recovered from the first fall, let alone the second. So, he uses a secret maneuver to move forward, which surprises everyone for some reason, and he comes near Pickle. Ritsu realizes what Baki is doing and calls Baki a born genius for coming up with such a mean trick. As Baki comes near Pickle, he slowly turns around and then suddenly slaps Pickle hard on the back. Despite all his toughness, Pickle begins to scream in pain and reveals the mark of the slap is left visible on his back. Ritsu explains that the slap on the back is a killer move, and the move is actually known as the hip strike, which has the same effect on everyone, including the ogre Yujiro. The move, hip strike, is taught in the Japanese art of Kyudo, a hybrid form of traditional martial arts, and in Kung Fu, the move is known as Columbus's egg. To perform this move, the muscles must be relaxed until they are loose enough to bend and limp, and then, the body turns into a whip, which makes the attack turn every part of the opponent's body into a weak point. Whether the skin is hardened and of a well-honed warrior, a blow to it from a painful as it is to an infant. Ritsu keeps going on with his speech and goes super off topic, so let's go back to watching Baki, who is still using his hand as a whip to beat Pickle. The echoes of the constant beating. Pickle takes a defensive posture just like a naked man does when he is caught cheating and tells Baki to stop torturing him. Tokugawa thinks that Baki might have finally gotten the primitive man under his ropes, but Hanema believes that the battle has just started. He explains that Baki's attacks have stung Pickle badly, but it has stung his pride even more. So, Pickle grins his teeth and takes his attacking stance that he used against Ritsu, Katsumi, and also Jack. Baki is fully aware what Pickle is about to do, so holds up his hands on the air, and then makes a stance that makes Ritsu realize that Baki is thinking of using another whip strike on Pickle as a counter move. But he then realizes that this is another move called Kokaiken once he sees Baki take a pose of a Royal Bengal Tiger. He explains that Kokaiken is a move that integrates the form and strength of a tiger, and it is an important kung fu technique. But what Ritsu doesn't understand is why Baki is reciting to use kung fu all of a sudden. Baki then changes his stance, jumping like a falcon, and Ritsu recognizes this move as Yasoken. Then Baki takes another stance of a mantis and then a gorilla, followed by a bear. So, Tokugawa wonders if Baki actually intends to fight or he just wants to imitate animals. But Ritsu knows what Baki is about to do, realizing that he is about to integrate all of the kung fu moves together, so he again calls Baki a born genius. But he wonders if all these animals would be enough to prey on the primitive man who is strong like a dinosaur. Baki then uses another form and emulates an incredibly strong extinct animal, a triceratops, and seeing that Pickle gets shocked as begins to sense the most powerful opponent he has ever known in Baki. He wonders why this fragile, little being, who should be on the verge of death, is currently making him feel like he is seeing a full-grown triceratops. He gets intimidated so much that he stands up to take a closer look at Baki. Baki reveals that he has got another card up his sleeve and jumps upward with his feet high, and then takes the posture of a flying dinosaur called pterosaurs. He is not done yet with showboating as he then transforms himself to the biggest rival of Pickle, a T-Rex, and makes Pickle tremble in fear once again. As Pickle only sees Baki as a T-Rex, he begins to get afraid, thinking that he doesn't stand against this mad sorcerer, and starts to step back in fear. As Baki integrates all of his form into one single form, he takes the form of an inexplicable godlike monster, and that terrifies Pickle. He has never seen any monster like this before. He sees that the monster has the teeth and tail of a T-Rex and the feet and horns of a Triceratops. He also sees that it has the wings and talons of the pterosaurs. So, with all the three powerful dinosaurs combined in one creature, Baki has now turned into an ultimate weapon of destruction, and that terrifies the bejesus out of Pickle. Every aspect of these three dinosaurs' strength had been engraved onto Pickle's mind and body, so he can't bear to even stand there. Baki doesn't show off any longer and comes to attack Pickle with great speed. But Pickle hesitates as he only sees the teeth, the horns, and the wings of his mightiest foes and wonders how he is going to survive against such a monster. Ritsu once again calls Baki a born genius and gets eager to see what will happen next. Baki, with the form of this inexplicable monster, lunges at Pickle and then uses his fingers as the T-Rex's teeth to twist Pickle's hand. Then, he slams Pickle on the ground with that momentum. Pickle gets up from the ground and sees that his hand is unharmed. What he doesn't understand is that what Baki is doing is just taking the form of these dinosaurs, and hasn't just magically become powerful like them. Anyway, Baki again lunges towards Pickle, pushing his limits, thinking that Pickle will just remain stunned like he was like before. But this time Pickle also prepares his own move to counter Baki's attack as he is up for the challenge. The narrator explains why taking a stance matters, and explains that the search for the best stance from which to start a sprint has gone on for a long time, ever since the Olympics after the World War II. Back then, sprinters used various styles of starting positions, since the history of the starting position has been the history of getting as close to the horizontal as possible. Eventually, a consensus was arrived at that the crouching stance was the best position from which to start a short distance race. With the help of a device called a starting block, the human body can get remarkably close to horizontal, and yet that's still not fully horizontal. But in this case, Pickle's stance is fully horizontal since he is using the wall behind him to take the stance. But the primitive man who has accomplished this incredible and unprecedented feat is not of modern era, so that is kind of unfortunate for modern mankind. Anyway, Pickle finally starts dashing towards Baki, and the time he takes to make contact with him is less than a second. Everything happens in the blink of an eye, and Ritsu sensed many things in that moment. First, he senses that this is what Pickle must have done back in the Jurassic Cretaceous period when he faced his mightiest enemies. Sometimes Pickle would use a tree for leverage, and sometimes a boulder. That's how he was able to stop a beast that weighed 5 tons, and in that same instant, Ritsu tells us that he has another thought. He tells us that Baki weighs only about 150 pounds, and if Ritsu, who weigh more than 220 pounds, couldn't withstand Pickle's charge attack, how could Baki hope to do so? In addition, Pickle had only started from a crouch position when he launched his attack on Ritsu, so this time, he thought things would be even more devastating. He thinks that he is going to see the end of this fight right here, but then again he wonders how can he have so many thoughts in less than a second. Then he loses himself in his useless thoughts and tells us about a delicious curry and rice, which has a sweet and spicy aroma. Since he is describing how rice tastes, let's move on from this and just focus on Tay fight instead. Baki stands his ground and faces Pickle, dropping his stance and waits for Pickle to attack him. As Pickle rushes at him at the speed of a bullet, Baki doesn't even try to dodge and takes the full force of the attack. However, it is Pickle who is sent flying surprisingly, and he is not just knocked backwards, rather literally sent flying by Baki and sent far in the air. Tokugawa can't believe what he sees and asks Ritsu how Baki managed to do that. Apparently, all that Baki had done was flick his hand, and with that strong flick, he shooed away Pickle like a fly. Ritsu explains that the flick that Baki did is neither jujutsu or aikido, yet a man who weighs more than 450 kilos is sent flying up into the rafters by someone quarter his weight with just a flick of the wrist. While Tokugawa and Ritsu wonders how strong Baki is, Hanayama calls Pickle amazing as he notices that Baki's flick hasn't even fazed him. Baki also calls Pickle one tough savage and calls him back to continue the fight. Tokugawa asks Hanayama what's so amazing about getting thrown literally halfway to the moon, and in reply, Hanayama tells him that when he saw the collision he felt like Pickle threw himself instead of Baki. He explains that the stronger the forward thrust of an object is, the more vulnerable it becomes to a force from the side. He gives off an example saying when a bullet is fired into a body, it doesn't follow a straight line because of the resistance of the muscles from the sides. The path that the bullet takes can be affected by any soft tissue it runs into, and there are times when even something as flimsy as a leaf can cause a bullet to change its trajectory. In this case, Pickle is the bullet, and Baki's hand flick acted as a leaf to deflect him in another direction. Because of Hanayama's explanation, Mr. Sidetracker Ritsu is reminded of something. He tells us a story about yet again a boxing match that took place in Miami, Florida in 1964. It was the heavyweight title fight between the champion Sonny Liston and the young Cassius Clay. At one point of the fight, Liston threw a powerhouse rig and Clay brushed it aside with a flick of the glove. The result of that flick was that Liston's shoulder was completely dislocated. Although most experts credited Clay's strength for causing the injury, it was actually the force behind Liston's punch that caused him to dislocate his own shoulder more than Clay's deflection of it. Moving on, Baki takes a pee break in the middle of the fight and continues peeing at 4 different directions of the wall. That makes even the savage man wonder who can someone be so savage. After Baki is done with whatever he was doing, he takes pride in telling Pickle that he has peed in 8 different spots, and like a dog, he has marked this arena as his territory. Pickle gets mad as he realizes that Baki is mocking him, so he quickly jumps back to the ground to take back the territory that is rightfully his. Baki announces that he will be no longer using any tricks as he claims to have finally recovered enough to fight properly, and wants to finish this battle with a proper man-to-man fight. Baki stands close to Pickle, looking him straight in the eye. So, Pickle uses his both hands to smash Baki's head and makes him fall face first on the ground. Baki realizes that he shouldn't have proposed a head-to-head fight, but before he can take back the offer, Pickle stomps his head with his feet repeatedly and even begins to use his fists at the same time, raining dozens of punches at him in seconds. However, Baki reveals to have used his arms to block all of the attacks and gets up again with no strength in his body. Pickle again punches him, but as Baki blocks it with his arm, he realizes that his steel arm has turned into a weak spot because of taking so many consecutive lethal blows. Pickle then sends him flying to 30 meters over the ground, and while in midair, Baki looks at Hanayama and wishes that he had a physique like him, as he believes that he would have had a better chance at beating Pickle then. Baki also remembers how his father, the ogre, Yujiro, fights and wonders if his father would be able to beat the primitive man. But what he wants to see the most is himself beating Pickle. So, he with full determination lands on his feet and then smiles at Pickle. In these 18 years of life, Baki has lived only to become the best so that he could defeat the Earth's strongest man, who is none other than his father. He asks himself why he wants to fight Yujiro, and answers himself that it's to get vengeance for what Yujiro did to his mother. That was 4 years ago, when Yujiro literally crushed Baki's mother and killed her with a bear hug. Yet Baki doesn't actually hate his father for that and actually admires him for his overwhelming strength. Once he realizes that, Baki wonders if he could be the copy of his father one day. As the fight between him and Pickle continues, Baki still thinks about only his father and begins to copy his father's fighting style to dodge Pickle's attacks. With the repeated dodges and blocks, Baki no longer looks to be fighting, and instead it looks like he is performing an intricate dance. Even Pickle gets shocked seeing the fast movements of Baki, as he had never seen such speed before on land, water, or air. A distant memory suddenly hits Pickle and he remembers that as a teenager, he wanted to eat a butterfly as a snack. But no matter how much he tried, he failed to catch the butterfly, so Pickle now feels that Baki has turned into a butterfly that he cannot just catch. Baki ends the dodging session and takes the initiative to fight head-on finally. Ritsu realizes that Baki has improved extravagantly in his fighting abilities, and that makes him wonder if he will ever be able to reach that level. He realizes that even the god of war, Doppo Orochi, or the living embodiment of fighting Goki Shibukawa, or even his own teacher, Master Kaku, can't reach the level that Baki is in anymore, and that makes him super envious of Baki. Baki again continues the dodging session and Tane with an invisible sword. Baki hits Pickle's most sensitive spot, the nuts. With that attack, Pickle realizes that he will no longer be able to become a father, and the intensity of pain hits him and hits him hard. He feels such an excruciating pain that he falls on the ground and begins to roll on the floor. Ritsu decides to tell us why getting punched or kicked in the balls feels so painful, and goes with a thorough explanation that while in the wombs, testicles are formed inside the abdomen and only descends to the right place after birth. He explains that no other part of a man's body is more fragile or weaker than the nuts, and goes on to give a lesson about reproduction. So, let's just focus on the fight again. Well, it seems the fight is already over because of the punch in the nuts. But the look on Pickle's face when he got punched meant that he will take revenge once the pain goes away. And the caveman does get up with rage and gets ready to kill Baki for destroying his future children. No one could believe that at the very end, but this is what Pickle had waiting for them. The first one to notice it is Baki, as he is the only one to have perfect 20/20 vision. Baki notices that as Pickle is transforming into his final, real form, there are marks appearing on Pickle's body, which are puncture wounds. These puncture wounds, which look like they were caused by a falchion sword, ran in a diagonal row across Pickle's upper body. So he wonders how those scars appeared out of nowhere, since there's nobody around them carrying a machine gun who could just shoot Pickle. So, Baki realizes that these wounds might have been caused by the claws of the extinct dinosaurs that Pickle fought 100 million years ago. However, the first ones to know about these scars are not Baki but Ritsu, who reveals that similar scars are also on Pickle's back that Baki hasn't noticed yet. Ritsu claims to know precisely what has caused these scars, and according to the shape, size, and era, he believes that they are from a T-Rex's teeth, which are similar to a falchion sword. Ritsu concludes that Pickle was a brave man who had survived the jaws of a T-Rex, so he has nothing but respect for Pickle and begins to applaud for him with Tokugawa and Hanayama. It's as if Ritsu's clapping has given Pickle new motivation as he begins to manually rearrange his dislocated joints and transforms into full battle mode. Seeing his muscles transform into something inhumane, Baki realizes this must be one of Pickle's final forms, not the final form. So, he realizes that the real battle between him and Pickle begins right here, right now. Pickle completes his final form, and now, with the awakening of his primeval memories, the already sturdy portions of him become even more solid, and he gets ready to kill. The powerful portions are so ferocious that they emanate a red kill aura, which surrounds him completely. Baki accepts Pickle's metamorphosis transformation as the finest appraisal of his friendship, and shows how confident he still is even after seeing such a demonic form. Ritsu acknowledges how humanity has continued to ceaselessly evolve since the moment history began. Simultaneously, humans have obtained copious weapons, like stones and wood, to make weapons. Then they complicated their own ideas to make swords, guns, and deadly weapons like missiles and even nuclear weapons, thanks to Oppenheimer. But Ritsu feels that, as a result of making these weapons, humanity has lost something and left something behind. And that is tough skin, powerful muscles, sturdy bones, and a spirit that doesn't succumb to pain. These things that humanity has left behind have again returned, and Ritsu believes that the ancient man Pickle is here to remind them of that. Ritsu goes on with his thoughts and adds that as the weapons humans wield become more and more powerful, humans have lost these things one by one and have grown obese so much that they can no longer even protect their own safety. So, Ritsu believes that things should change for the better, even if it means that only the strong will get to live. Going back to the battle between Baki and Pickle, Baki stays inside Pickle's reach to repay Pickle's friendship. Pickle punches Baki with all his strength, but Baki no longer gets thrown away, and stands firmly on the ground. He explains that the only reason he didn't get hit with any knockback is because they both matched with the same strength. Baki tells Pickle that this is thanks to the evolution of humankind, for which Baki has become better than the primitive man. Baki then uses the martial arts passed down from generations to generations and fights back with the strength of many others. It's an all-out war, and as Pickle comes to attack Baki, he begins to see everything in slow motion and counters with even faster punches and kicks. Baki keeps hitting Pickle with deadly blows, and Pickle remembers how once he busted the fangs that attacked him with his clenched fists. He grabbed the sharp claws that assaulted him and broke them. Pickle remembers how he was the greatest of his era, but now he's getting cornered and has become a toy. His strength advantage is no longer working and is getting continuously torn apart by Baki. Baki overcomes the hopelessly big difference in strength and the impossible to fill gap in power with his martial arts. As Baki finally seems to be on the verge of victory, something sprouts in his heart. A bad habit is born, and Baki goes close to Pickle, who is already crying in pain, and thrusts both before him. Pickle realizes that Baki wants a close combat fist fight, so this means that this will be a fight of stamina now. They both begin to trade blows with each other with their fists, and soon after, the difference in stamina is shown as Baki gets overpowered by the primitive man. Pickle then ends the fist fight, going against the rules, and slams Baki on the ground as he feels the fear of losing to him. As Baki remains unconscious on the ground, Pickle realizes that their fight is over, so he sits down on the ground. The crew members arrive to take back Baki, thinking that the battle is over. But neither Baki moves, as he is unconscious, nor Pickle. Ritsu realizes that the only reason Pickle isn't displaying the will to attack is because he knows that he will win against Baki because he has the patience to do so. So he believes that Pickle has won this fight. But Hanamiya has a different opinion on this and thinks Baki is the rightful winner in this battle. After the people have escorted the unconscious Baki to get him some medical attention, Pickle finally stands, although barely, and looks at his fist, where he reveals that there are 4 broken teeth, which are probably Baki's. Pickle then forgets about the teeth and proceeds to go outside into the open world. Ritsu wants to stop Pickle, but Tokugawa tells him to leave him be, as Pickle also deserves to have a life since he is also a human and not some animal. Although Tokugawa bets that the mad scientist, Pain, wouldn't like that so much and would probably panic. In the meantime, another Einstein-looking doctor comes and treats the wounds on Baki, but he sees that Baki has already left the hospital room. He reveals being on the rooftop, feeling hurt and depressed as he lost against Pickle in the end. But he doesn't feel that low anymore, as he also reveals that he is at the rooftop to actually meet with Pickle. They both sit together to see the night view of Tokyo, and Baki asks Pickle if he still remembers the majestic view of the Great Cretaceous period too. Pickle actually does, as he imagines seeing a vast open field filled with yellow flowers and greenery. Baki also imagines seeing such a view for himself and wonders if he can turn back time to have a small glimpse of how Pickle lived. A few days later, in the center of Washington, D.C., ordinary citizens are prohibited from entering a 700-meter diameter perimeter around the famous old St. Renaz Hotel. The president, not Barack Obama, reveals to be talking with the ogre Yujiro and tells them that this is his first time entering a room without security besides in the White House. Although Barack knows that Yujiro is the most dangerous man in the world, he doesn't feel fear in him and instead feels privileged to be here chatting with him. Yujiro reveals being angry as always and tells Barack to stop talking so much. Barack apologizes to him for that and moves on to the topic of the great transition of power. Barack gets to business and promises to take 10 seconds of Yujiro's time. He stands up first and swears to Yujiro that the United States of America will have an amicable friendship with the ogre, the strongest man on earth, Master Yujiro Hanma, and promises him that they will respect him and will never interfere with his life. Barack then swears before God to execute this genuine treaty of friendship and then shows him a lump of coal, which is the main topic here. Barack explains that a pressure of 100,000 atmospheres will transform coal into diamonds. So, he wants to see that happen with his own eyes, and since Yujiro has claimed to be more powerful than a nuclear weapon, Barack thinks that this should be an easy task for him. Yujiro takes the coal in his hands and squishes it with so much power in less than a second that the coal instantly turns into a diamond. On the other side, at a foggy facility, a group of sketchy people reveal themselves to be conducting experiments on Pickle, and that is none other than Pain. But he has good intentions, as he wants to return Pickle to his original fossilized state so that he can escape the curse of the modern era. A meeting is held to discuss this matter amongst the leaders of the US, and everyone has different opinions about it. But after some time, they unanimously agreed to put Pickle back in the salt reserves. But before he can do so, Pickle escapes from the lab facility, and before disappearing from the eyes of modern humans, he thanks the captain for giving him the chance to see the modern era. Did you enjoy this recap? If you did, kindly like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can bring you a recap of the next episodes of this exciting action anime series. Until next time, stay safe and take care.